Hello, friends, and welcome back to a bonus episode of the Jank Tank. My name is Timothy Zaccanino. I'm going to be your Pack One Pick One today, and joining me, I've got two Windmill Slams with me. I've got Teld, as usual, to talk about Peasant Cube, and we've got Daneelius back on the show as well to give us some insights and tell us how wrong we are about everything in Tarkir Dragonstorm. Gentlemen, welcome. How's it going?
Going good, going good.
Another day, another new Skyfisher. Life is good.
They really did just drop another new Skyfisher in this set.
The best Skyfisher?
I'm getting the vibe that in general the Magic community is super excited about Tarkir Dragonstorm, but I'm like super stoked, and it helps that like I'm coming off the back of like maybe the worst week that I've had in like years, and it's just like all subsided now, and it's all culminated in like, hey, you get to talk about Magic this weekend, and then you get to do it again next weekend for the mainline review. So yeah, to the listener, we I don't know, we're recording the Peasant review before the mainline review, but as usual, it might come out in the reverse order, so we've got to do that weird retrospective thing when we're recording the next episode. But yeah, excitement level for me personally, very, very high for Tarkir. I'm assuming it's roughly the same for you guys.
I was not prepared for the amount of tonal and like what is it, like excitement whiplash that I was going to experience, because you know we saw the art they had teased back a ways back, and it looked very CGI. It looked very lame. And then this set had some of the best art we've had in a minute. It's got some fantastic pieces, like a lot of really serious cards. I don't know if there was a single pun in the entire set. It actually looks like a Magic the Gathering set as opposed to whatever Aether Drift was. So yeah, I wasn't prepared to like go from having low levels of excitement and thinking that they would mess this up to being super excited that they somehow managed to not only do Tarkir justice in terms of flavor and design while bringing it into the future, but they also managed to very competently weave the dragons into like the lore of the world without it feeling like we're just in Dragons of Tarkir. So really excited about it at this point. We got the cons, whatever, back, while also preserving the sort of changes they made in Dragonstorm or Dragons of Tarkir, excuse me. So yeah, I have to give them a lot of credit on the design team that they did an excellent job in that regard.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. And personally, Tarkir is probably my favorite block of all time. I think it's a really cool plane. Loved Cons of Tarkir as a draft format 15 years ago or whenever it was that it came out. Didn't quite hit me the same when it returned to Arena last year. That was a bit of a bummer, realizing just how much better modern Magic Limited in my mind is than the old stuff. But yeah, I have a lot of excitement for this set. I think they really hit it out of the park.
I think to Cons of Tarkir's credit, I also didn't really enjoy it the second time around. I thought it was okay. However, if I look at other sets that came out in that time, I highly doubt I would use the words okay to describe them.
That's yeah. You can only judge sets on a curve, you know, for the world that they came out in, and I think Tarkir was vastly superior to most sets around it at the time.
When it came out, I think it was the best set of all time. I think it was my number one. I think now it's probably slightly above average set that I personally didn't vibe with super hard. But I had a lot of nostalgia for it. Played it a few times when it was on Arena, and I had an okay time. It was nice. You know, I didn't have a bad time, and I think that is probably not something I would say about almost any other set from that time period.
Yeah, I'm also interested to see, because for me, I think one of the big parts that I loved about original Tarkir was Morph, and over time, I think Morph has really not aged super well, and so the fact that that's kind of the big piece of original Tarkir that's not here, I think is probably for the better.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it when we were getting the spoilers, but yeah, I was surprised we didn't get like a Mega Morph or Ultra Morph or Mighty Morphin Con Rangers.
Okay, sorry, my mic cut out. It sounds like you guys are having a jolly trip through memory lane about Cons of Tarkir.
Oh yeah, we filled a lot of time there.
All right. Well, unless you guys are still waxing poetic about KTK 10 years ago, we should probably move on to talking about this grading scale that we're going to implement. This was Daneelius' idea. I think it's a very good idea. All right. So we're going to use the limited resources style grading scale, the A through F scale. We're going to tweak it for cube purposes. So, you know, the grading scale for limited involves a lot of Ds and Fs and Cs and stuff like that, because they generally talk about every single card in a set. We're going to be more in the A, B, C range because, why would we talk about every single F in the set? But this is a good way to kind of like unify our thoughts. We were using this tagging system that was kind of a hassle to go in and actually tag every single card, but also, Daneelius is working with a completely different cube. He's got the Daneelius Peasant All-Star Cube, and then Teld and I are coming from the perspective of the Jank Diver Gaming Peasant Cube. So a lot of times, like, the tags don't really work for what Daneelius's cube is doing, and, some of the conversation Daneelius will have about a card doesn't really apply to our cube. So this is just a kind of a universal way for us to grade the cards that we're going to talk about. I don't think we're going to make it a huge part of this episode or, reviews moving forward, but if we've got grades that differ significantly on certain cards, we might actually talk about our grades a little bit more. So I don't want to get into the scale too much. It's a basic A through F scale, but the A's are the bombs, the cards that pull you, like the cards that you're basically never cutting. You've got your B's as kind of like the draws into certain colors, and then your C's are kind of like all of the filler stuff that like doesn't, sway you in the actual draft, but does make your deck like, certain percentage of the times. And then below that, D's and F's. There won't be a lot of D's and F's in the review. A lot of times those will be cards that we think are cool that we're mentioning or the community thinks is really cool, but we don't actually think are like super cubable. And then hopefully we're not talking about too many F's. Hopefully there's no like huge grade differences where someone gave something like a B and somebody else gave it an F, but we'll see. There might be one or two of those. But any thoughts on the grading scale before we actually start talking about cards?
Yeah, I think a couple of things to remember is that an A in a purely peasant environment, usually A's are going to be rares in your traditional limited environment. So a lot of times these are your best in class, hyper efficient type of cards, as opposed to just, there's not quite as many cards that completely flip the table at peasant. You have your invasions of Amonkhet's that would get there, but there's not a ton of them. Keep in mind too that the general power level of peasant is such that like if a card is a C in the limited environment, it is probably closer to like a D at peasant. Although sometimes cards play better. Like we've had situations where cards play much better in the context of cube than they did in their own retail environment. So it's a little bit flexible. We're trying this out. And obviously there's some speculation, but I think there's gonna be more Ds than we expect because those are cards that are narrow. So they may only go into like one deck, even if they're a reasonable role player in that deck, for example.
And this is something that I actually have done for my whole list at this point, as I've gone through and graded the whole list, partially because I do a lot of kind of draft retrospectives with my drafters to kind of go through how they navigated their seat. And I think the most important grading that experience for us has been kind of the difference between B's and C's, because there's all cube cards are good. We know that's why they're in the cube. They're really good. The question is like, okay, is this a card that really draws you in and you feel comfortable taking as kind of the first card of a color? Should you feel comfortable taking a certain card as the first card of its color, or should you kind of relegate that to being more of a support card once you already know that you're in a lane? I think that's the most valuable kind of grade difference that you'll see in cube in general.
Yeah, so we're going to start applying those. Again, we could go kind of in depth about what like the minuses and pluses for this grading scale mean, but I think we do want to put the crux of this episode on the cards themselves rather than the grading scale. So just know that that's something that we're tagging these cards with moving along is the A through F scale, and when there's a huge difference between what we think about the cards, we'll probably discuss that a little bit more. But with all that being said, we've got roughly 1 million cards to talk about here today, and we're on a little bit of a time limit. So if you guys are ready, I'm ready to just start jumping in and talking about some Magic cards.
Let's do it.
Yep.
All right, so I'll start by reading off the first couple few. We're going to start with white here, which actually has quite a bit to talk about just to kind of kick things off. And our first card of this set is Descendant of Storms. This is a single white mana for a 2/1 uncommon human soldier, and whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 1 and a white. If you do, it endures 1. So a lot of new mechanics, we'll mention them as they come up for the first time. Endure has a number on it, and it means you either put that many +1/+1 counters on the creature, or you create a spirit token with those stats, right? So Endure 1 is either put a +1 counter on this, or create a 1/1 spirit creature token. And obviously for Descendant of Storms, the immediate comparison is Usher of the Fallen, right? This is not a strictly better Usher. It is worth noting that, like, this is an attack trigger. So the second that you declare an attack, you have to make the decision of whether you're going to actually spend the mana and then what you're going to do with the Endure ability. Whereas Usher of the Fallen is a boast ability, so you can attack with Usher and then kind of use the boast ability for the rest of the turn, depending on how things play out. But obviously this can also go tall instead of going wide, which is something Usher couldn't do, so it's a different enough. It is Savannah Lions. I mean, it is Savannah Lions plus. Usher of the Fallen, not a card that I'm super excited about anymore. I have this in the C range, C- range. What do you guys think? Do you think this is better than Usher? And, you know, irregardless of the comparison, do you think it's good enough for a cube slot as a Savannah Lions with some upside?
I think this card, even though it reads strictly better than Usher, I think it's going to get you into game positions where it's actually worse than Usher, because you're going to commit your mana and then it's going to go poorly for you and your turn is going to be bad. Like, one of the advantages of Usher is that you can decide if you're going to do something with your mana. And so you have time, right? You have time to see if your opponent's got a removal spell or if your opponent's got, you know, this or that. Like, especially if you go for the Endure one, I can see this working out poorly some percentage of the time. I don't know. I'm pretty down on Savannah Lions in general, so I'm a little lower on this card than you guys are, because I'm just hoping to avoid ever putting a Savannah Lion in any deck I ever draft. And so, but by that happening, I am also generally trying to avoid playing aggro, which is where this card is probably good.
Yeah, I'm definitely a bit higher than that. I think there's two really big advantages that this. First of all, I will say I agree with you totally on the downside versus Usher, and I do think that's real and relevant. Kind of. I actually think that the secret on Usher is that you're pretty rarely activating the ability. Most of the time, it's just a Savannah Lions. And yes, occasionally when you don't have anything to do at all on turn 2, you'll activate that ability. But in your low to the ground aggro deck, you don't want to be spending turn 2 generating a 1/1, even if it's quote unquote free, because the one axis that it's really not free on is time. And in a low to the ground aggro deck, time is everything. You're just trying to get the game over as fast as possible. So I don't really think that ability matters as much as people think it does. It matters more maybe in a vintage cube environment where people don't always have, you know, 1 and 2 drop defensive plays to make. Even there, that honestly kind of surprises me that Usher still sticks around in vintage cube environments. But two big advantages for Descendant of Storms. One is when you play this on 1 and your opponent has a 1 power blocker on 1. I think that is a common scenario, and just giving you the option of having this attack, you know, through that 1 power creature, I think does matter quite a lot. The second thing is when you draw this off the top, I think it's a much more relevant top deck because it gets to attack on turn 6, turn 7 as a 3/2. So, I mean, does that add up, you know, to it being a massive upgrade over Usher? No, I just think it's a slight upgrade over Usher. I wasn't playing Usher before, but I think it was, you know, definitely was cubable in Peasant. I think this is a little bit more. So I just have it as a solid C. I think there's a lot of decks. As long as you're assertive, I think this is a card I will generally be happy to play. But I'm also a little bit happier in general with the 1 mana 2/1 stat line than y'all are.
Yeah, I was going to say the Savannah Lions stat line is a little bit better in Daneelius' environment than ours. Hard Evidence is another call out here. Like, the Descendant of Storms being able to attack through a Thraben Inspector or a 0/3 token or something like that is upside that Usher doesn't have. So that is kind of nice.
That's true, but I do want to pose the alternative. Like, if you're playing an aggressive deck and your opponent goes Hard Evidence or Thraben Inspector, right? You attack, you pump this, and you put a +1 counter on it, and then they untap and play a Shock. Don't you just kind of lose the game on the spot?
I don't think so. It's just like not playing a 2-drop. Like, you don't lose the game on the spot. You're behind on tempo. Like,
maybe that's an exaggeration, but you're definitely pretty far behind, right? Like, especially if you're against a deck that's playing towards the mid to late game. I don't know. I get it. I think this card is probably an upgrade over Usher, but I can't. I'm probably thinking worst case in this case, but that's because when I play aggro, it is always worst case. So
here's the way to think about it, I think, is that the big part of the big reason why you don't like the 1 minute 2/1 is because of that scenario you described. And this one at least has the upside of being able to get through it. So it's like, yes, you're right. What you described is a bad situation, but if you wait till turn 4, for instance, to double spell or, you know, double activate abilities by using this ability and playing a 2-drop, and now your 1 mana play eventually does actually get to attack, I think that makes it a significant upgrade.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's some skill testing there too, right? If you just are always dumping mana into this, then you're always getting blown out by the cheap removal spell like probably shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, new Savannah Lions. There we go. Okay, so the next one is maybe like, I'm glad we're getting to this like right off the beginning. This is like my hot take card of the entire set. So like, I'm glad it's the second card that's showing up here. I think this card reads like way better than people are talking about it, but I could be wrong here. So Dalkovin Pack Beasts is 2 and a white for a 0/4 uncommon ox with vigilance and mobilize 3. And mobilize just means whenever this creature attacks, you make a number of 1/1 tapped and attacking warrior tokens equal to that mobilized number, and you sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a 3-mana 0/3 that makes 3 1/1 attackers whenever it attacks, and you don't get to keep those 1/1s, they go away. I gave this a B-. Everybody else is a little bit lower. I'm coming in really hot on this because it just feels like it slots into like every single white deck in our environment, like token decks care, sacrifice decks care, aggressive decks care to some extent if they have like some sort of board pump. We do play like On the Job right now as an example. Obviously, like this is a 0/4, so your opponent just stacks like a couple 2/2s on it and it'll die, even if you get a couple damage off the mobilized tokens. But we play a lot of combat tricks now too, so like, I mean, a 0/4 attack in while you have open mana, like, are you assuming that I just have nothing if I jam this into your board of 2/2s? I don't know. I feel like it is a card that needs backup, obviously, but the backup like is there in the environment that we play, and the effect that it gives you, like just spit out like here's a hop to it every single turn, a temporary hop to it, but here's a free hop to it every time you attack. I'm sure you can find something to do with that.
Speaking of backup, you hit this with the green 2-drop. You know, it deals damage equal to its
sure, hit for 5 for the turn. Yeah, the toughness matters stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really hot on this card right now, but it reads like the type of card that people have arguments against, and I think they have totally valid arguments.
For what it's worth, my grade is only slightly lower than yours. I'm like half a letter grade lower, so instead of putting it into the low B, I put it into the high C range because I think you're probably not interested in this in blue-white specifically, which I think means I don't want to take it as a super early pick necessarily. But I think in all the other white decks in our cube, you can definitely make use of this. This is so many game objects. Yeah, three game objects. That's 3 Neighborhood Guardian triggers, or 3 Rosy Cotton triggers, or 3 Blood Artist triggers, or pick your poison.
That's the thing though, is you do have to talk about this card in the context of other cards being on the board or as well, right? Like it's not a good enough standalone card. It is a good support piece when you have the other things coming together.
Yeah, sure, but like Neighborhood Guardian is a 2/2 if you don't have a bunch of like cheap creatures to put into play, right? Like this is all of the white. The problem with all of these, discussing any of these white cards in particular or black cards in a vacuum, is that they all kind of compound on each other. And so I think this is a card that, yeah, you obviously have to have the other stuff for it to be really good. But like if your opponent has a 2/2 in play, you still attack them for 3 damage on turn 4, right? Like if they have they have to be able to block this in the first place. On top of this, if you're running it, I think we're only on one of these, but if you're running Golem or Ranger's Firebrand that you can tempt by the ring,
sure, and
you can put it on this creature, all right? They can't block with power greater. It has 0 power. Now we're kind of cooking, right? We have a functionally unblockable make 3 cards per turn creature. I actually think the ceiling on this card's insane, and I think it's a really cool card. Like it's so many game objects. That is an immense amount of game objects. Even if they're temporary, you will find things to do with this, I think.
Yeah, my issue is it's not a lot of game objects. It's one. When you cast it, it's just one game object. I agree that there are lots of very cool combos with this card. I think there's something to be said for kind of environment differences in general, where like, you know, you guys are much more interested in the kind of top end of a card's possibilities, and I'm definitely more looking at a card kind of in a vacuum more often, at least I think, in my cube. And in a vacuum, this card is just, I think, pretty garbage. You know, 0/4 for 3 mana I think is just really unacceptable, and I'm pretty down on 0 power creatures that need to attack because they're just so easy to block. And yes, you're right, you can construct those situations and say like, well, what if you have a Neighborhood Guardian in play, or what if you have a Rosie in play? And yes, that is totally true. And the smaller your environment is, and the more payoffs you have in that small environment for going wide, the better this gets. But even in that scenario, you've still played a 3 mana card that generates no value on ETB and can just be murdered or, you know, Doombladed or whatever, and you've traded it down on mana. So, you know, I definitely can see the vision, absolutely. I hope I'm wrong, because I think the card is very cool. It's doing something unique, certainly, at Peasant. I think it's going to be great in the retail environment, most likely. I think it'll be a lot better there. And if you're in a low interaction environment, especially, this gets way better. You know, when you're not worried about playing this and just having it die immediately at a negative mana exchange, that definitely makes it a lot better. And the smaller your cube is, and the more that your white section is really about going wide, I think this certainly makes a lot of sense. But for me personally, I doubt I'll be bringing this into my cube, but I can see the vision.
It could be trash. It could be total trash. But I'm starting hot on it because just, I don't know. I feel like the synergy pieces really pull things together more than just the floor of what the card is. And I mean, this still blocks a 3-mana 3/3. Like, this blocks your opponent's Eldrazi processors or whatever all day long. So I think there's merit to the fact that it is just an 0/4 blocker that can also play offense as well. So I don't think it's just completely dead cardboard because it doesn't make an ETB. Like, your opponent's never using murder on this anyway, so like it almost doesn't matter that it dies to equip. Plus, it's a 3-drop. Like, if they murder it, so what? Like, they murdered my 3-mana creature with their 3-mana removal spell. Like, that's fine. It does die to a lot of 2-mana removal spells these days, though. So could be totally wrong about this. Willing to accept like the double fat L if this is just like a 49%er on 17 lands or whatever. But I wanted to stake a claim on a card, and this was the one I staked the claim on. And man, next one, I think I even want to come up higher on my grade. I have this as a C. I think it's even better than that. So Salt Road Pack Beast is 5 and a white for a 4/3 common beast. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control, so affinity for creatures. It's a little weird they didn't put that on there, since they eroded all the old creatures to say that. When it enters, draw a card. So 6 mana 4/3 ETB, draw a card is the baseline here, and then you can get this down to potentially just white mana. You can shave up to 5 generic mana off the cost. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons here, like the cantrip creatures. I think the one card like to really compare it to is the Argivian Phalanx from DMU, which was a 4-mana 4/4, maybe with Vigilance, that cost 6 mana, cost 1, like it had affinity for creatures. It was the same kind of setup, but without a cantrip on it. And that cantrip is huge when you're talking about a creature of this size that can come down for like 1, 2, 3 mana. I think pretty easily too, right? Like, like you will have games where this is 6 mana, your opponent just cleared off your board, you top deck this, or games where you can't get it down for less than 4 or 5 mana. But how many games are you going to play this where it costs just white for a 4/3 that draws a card?
You play your Ox, you attack with it, you've got 4 creatures in play. Boys. There you go.
I think this card is really hot for the limited environment, and I mean, just as far as cantrip creatures go, like the white decks are really good at just putting material on board, and Salt Road Pack Piece should cost like, let's say on average 3 mana for your white creature based decks. Like, that's just really good. A 3 mana 4/3 draw card. That's just an excellent card.
Yeah, I started out kind of lower on this because, as people know, we don't really just like these cantrip creatures that draw a card. But I think looking at it, thinking about it more, I'm going to join Daneelius up there in the low B range. I think this card's kind of wild. Like, it plays well with all of the things, you know, whether it be Skyfishers, up the Beanstalk type cards. You know, you can reanimate it. It's a mid-sized creature if you play any of those spells. Like, it's really efficient. It's really solid. Even if you play it for like 4 mana, it's not the worst thing ever. You know, it's like you're in Seraph Packmate range, which is a playable card.
Yeah, this card's cracked. It's utterly cracked. I think it's going to be maybe the thing that holds back the retail environment. Honestly, I'm a little bit worried about it in retail. The fact that it's a common. Like, the fact that in you know it's not that hard in either the retail environment or in Cube to play 1-drop into Raise the Alarm Effect into this on 3. Now, here's an even crazier start. 1-drop into Raise the Alarm Effect into 1-drop into this on 3. Like, you can double spell with this on 3. That's insane. Like, I think that there's going to be a number of cases where you get to cast this for 1 or 2 mana. And it's important, I think, you know, we haven't really seen a lot of cantrip creatures that are this huge that don't cost like 5 mana. Oh no, you're playing against somebody who's on a high removal, you know, blue-black control deck or whatever, and this is just a 4 mana 4/3 draw card. You know the kind of card that high removal decks really don't want to see? They don't want to see cantripping creatures. The only case in my mind where this actually struggles is against, you know, a black-red style deck with a lot of removal and pressure and board sweeping effects. You know, it's like if they can keep your board clear and they're pressuring you, and so it's hard for this to actually come down relatively early. Okay, then maybe there it starts to get a little weaker. I think that this is a card that I'm very happy to take, you know, as my first white card, absolutely. And I think it's going to be synergistic with a lot of different things that you're doing while also just being an insane rate. So yeah, I think this card is incredible. One of the best cards in the set.
Yeah, it's possible too that this card's even better in our environment than we're giving it credit for, even relative to you, just because our environment does the white decks pretty unanimously outside of blue white really, really care about going wide. And I'm pretty sure blue white's going to play enough creatures for this to still be good.
Yeah, this is going to be like DM. You remember week 1 of DMU where people had like 4 or 5 Tolarian Terrors in every deck? That's going to be week 1 of this set. Is people are going to have like 5 of these, and you're going to see someone drop like 3 of them in a row on the same turn. Yeah,
they chain into each other. You just draw. You do your pack beasts, drawing more pack beasts.
Hey, and if you have to run it out on 6 mana, it's not the worst thing in the world either. But yeah, geez, that might. I agree that if this card is very good in the retail limited set, we might have a problem. But let's go ahead and move on from there. Little dude here, just the seest card that ever seen in life. Fortress Kinguard is 1 white for a 1/2 common dog soldier. The dogs in Tarkir look a lot more like dogs these days for some reason. It says when it enters, it endures 1. So you're talking either a 2 mana 2/3 or a 2 mana 1/2 that makes another 1/1. And that's just a nice little raise the alarms plus type card. We're used to getting 2 1/1 bodies for our 2 mana. This is a total of 2/3 stats for 2 mana, which is kind of nice. I mean, it's all sorcery speed, it's all face up on the table, but I guess you're probably making the token more often than not. But especially if you have +1/+1 counter synergies, which our cube isn't really like centered around that in any super meaningful way. It gets better, Endure gets better for that as well. But as far as just like here's some stats for 2 mana, like just a perfectly solid C level card, I think.
Yeah, I think I've just been spoiled by Marionette Apprentice because I see this card and I'm just like, where's the line that says when a creature dies, they take damage?
Oh man, Marionette Apprentice, not a fair comparison. Not a fair comparison.
We have Apprentices like one of the top 2 or 3 maybe black cards in our cube, so it's unfortunate that has to be the comparison. But yeah, I think this card is going in every single go wide deck you have. I think the fact that yes, you can just curve this into Cutzel in a white green deck to draw a card, putting the counter on it isn't totally irrelevant. Though yeah, I think obviously most of the time you're making the 1/1, and I just think it's now the best in class raise the alarm we have in white. I would prefer the stats on this versus instant speed. I think the fact that it makes 2 white bodies is relevant for Battle Screech, certainly. So I think this card is just extremely solid. I currently don't actually run any raise the alarms because I just don't think any of them are quite good enough. But I think this one probably is good enough to run.
Mm-hmm. I'm always been a fan of Raise the Alarms. We're actually going to talk about a gold Raise the Alarms later on as well. Teld, you've got to read the next one. This is the most Teld card that ever Teld. And I'm going to be honest, when I saw this card, I just assumed it was a rare for whatever reason. But it's an uncommon.
Yeah, so this is Sun Pearl Kieran. It's 1 and a white for a 2/1 flash flying Kieran creature. When it enters, return up to 1 other target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it was a token, draw a card. So this is the one card that I'm willing to acknowledge. There's zero bias whatsoever here. This is the one I have in my review.
It's a forever card. It definitely is. It's just the best version of these Skyfishers we've ever seen at Uncommon ever. Like
might actually be better than the card core Skyfisher.
Almost certainly better than Skyfisher. I mean, it doesn't have stats, but like everything else on it is upside. Like, and it's not just that this is a 2 mana 2/1 flash pick up your thing, like the Rescuer Chwinga and all those other cards that do that. But like the fact that you could eat a mobilized, I think the joke here is that you're supposed to eat a mobilized token that's sticking around and going to die in a turn, and then you draw a card off of it. Like you just sorcery speed this thing. Daneelius has mentioned multiple times, just like being able to sacrifice a random food or laying around, or it doesn't literally sacrifice, but if you just pick up a food or whatever you have just kind of floating around that you don't need, like being able to 2 mana 2/1 flash fly and draw a card, that's again just a great baseline card. And then you get to do all the other Skyfisher things. It doesn't pick up lands, notably. These Skyfishers are way, way, way better when they can pick up lands, but like you're not complaining about anything that's on this card.
Yeah, the flash on this means that the gameplay patterns are going to be really annoying to deal with. Zephyr Sentinel was kind of in the same boat, except this is just so much more flexible and powerful.
Yeah, we've come up a lot on Chwinga in our environment after I added it relatively recently. I now think it's like actually a strong pull into white is kind of my feeling on that card, and I think this is just better. So I think this card is fantastic. Goes in. I can't imagine a deck that you're not playing this in.
Yeah, what a card. I asked last year for a 2 mana 2/1 flash flying that gave a creature indestructible on ETB. This isn't that, but it's kind of in the spirit of what I was asking for as far as like a way to save a creature from something, even if you have to recast it. Again, I would not have been surprised if this was a rare.
Just last thing, this is a card that is so exciting that we're actually talking about this probably in the mainline review as well.
The next one, this is actually probably a good one. Daneelius had to step away for a second. I don't think he has anything super positive to say about this card either. I don't think so. The card, we're going to move off the creatures here. The card here is Duty Beyond Death. Just to read it real quick, it's 1 and a white for an uncommon instant. As an additional cost to cast it, sacrifice a creature. And the effect is creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Now, I don't actually think this is like that great. Obviously, you can like engineer those situations where it's like, oh, I sack my one thing that was blocking, and you attacked me with like 7 creatures, and I like stacked up blocks in such a way that I'm like completely going to blow you out. That sort of stuff can happen. The reason I'm interested in this is because this is just like a really strong effect for uncommon. Like I could see this actually being like even commander playable as a 2-mana card, like these mass like board wipes that or board pumps that leave you in a better position than you were before you had to use it, which this obviously requires a creature to sacrifice. It's not just all upside. It's not just going to blow your opponent out every single time. It can get countered and you could be down your creature as well. So it's like not just like a huge like fog plus or anything like that. It's not the next Teferi's protection. Not the case I'm trying to make, but like for this amount of output at uncommon, I was just very surprised to see that on a 2-mana spell because the upside on this is just really, really huge. Is it the type of card I'm excited to like throw in a cube? No, though I do think there were like Boros and Orzhov decks that like could probably just kill you out of nowhere with something like this if you're not expecting it, or just like completely ruin you in combat if you attack them. So I wanted to mention it. I do think it's like C to D level as far as a cube card goes, but I was just surprised to see this sort of like output on a mass protection spell for an uncommon.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about this card is that it's a card that they put at uncommon, but I sort of feel like its play pattern and output is better in the context of a more powerful environment or in commander. So this is actually a card that Chris and I were talking about for the main line. I don't know if we probably won't get there because the sack of creature is such a real cost, but these omni protection effects or whatever, these large scale protections are much better against Wrath of God effects that we don't have at Peasant. They're better into like bigger creatures or more engine-y kind of cards that you get in the mainline cube, these really powerful kind of setups. I think this is the kind of card that scales up in game power pretty well. But I actually think at Peasant, I'm a little less excited about it, despite the fact that it's probably easier to trigger the Saka creature effect. And I don't know if it gets there on those more powerful environments anyways. I suspect this is a card that I will put in something like a, Wrath, or like, if you're especially like something like Caesar EDH or something where you're like encouraged to sack things. It's probably excellent there.
I'm curious what you guys think of it in the retail format where you have Endure and Mobilize as well, like floating around. Like there's just token generation attached to 2 of the clan's major like set mechanics as well.
Yeah, I hate the line of text as an additional cost sack a creature. I hate that so much. That being said, I will give it credit. The effect on this card is wild. Like I do think it's important to note that the effect on this card is absolutely wild. Instant speed, 2 mana, indestructible to your team, and counters to your team. You threw on here Make a Stand as a comp. That's 3 mana for indestructible to your team, and they get +1/+0, which, yes, helps you win combat this turn, but this leaves behind a bunch of power and toughness, theoretically, in very specific situations. So, yes, I that's the problem. It's a interesting effect for Go Wide just because of how much power you're getting on that line, but there are just enough situations where you just can't cast this. Even in your Go Wide decks, you don't always just get to say, I have 5 creatures in play. It's like, that doesn't always happen. So this is a card that I would be interested in seeing played in retail. I could imagine a world where I'm testing this in the cube environment just because of how powerful the effect is, but I hate that line of text as an additional cost stack creature. So I'm starting low on it, but I could imagine this one being wrong on this just because we just haven't seen this level of output. Unbreakable Formation even doesn't do it because you have to do that as a rare. You have to do that at sorcery speed. So like
for 3 mana, yeah,
for 3 mana. So like we just haven't seen this before, and I'm willing to be wrong, but I hate that first line.
Yeah, and just to touch on the retail environment for a second, I think the interaction with Mobilize is going to be legitimately terrifying. Like, I think this is the kind of card that in the retail environment, if your opponent has a good Mardu curve out, there's going to be a lot of spots where this is the card that you just can't beat, right? And you just kind of have to hope to dodge it.
Well, very quick comment on the retail environment. There's actually a lot less mobilized than you think. They did the thing where they spoiled all the mobilized cards at first, and then people were like, oh man, just imagine all the mobilized. But basically they did all of it in the first few days. And I think 3 or 4 of the mobilized cards cost 4 mana. So I don't think you're actually going to be facing down. I think the Pack Beast that we already talked about is maybe going to be the most scary of the mobilized cards that you see, at least under rare. So we'll find out, but I don't think it's going to be as ubiquitous as it seemed from the spoiler season because they just started with all those cards.
Yeah, I haven't internalized the whole set yet. So in my mind, yeah, this is like, all right, there's a bunch of mobilized. It's going to be disgusting.
All right, a couple more cards to close out white here. The first one, Static Snare, a card that's going to come up for our mainline review as well. This is 4 and a white for an uncommon enchantment with flash. It costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature. Up the Beanstalk, anyone? This is the second Beans card in white that we've seen today. When it enters, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. So 5 mana, flash, get rid of something, but it can get down to as little as 1 white mana if there are attacking creatures. So obviously the card that comes to mind is Witchstalker Frenzy, which is the 4 mana deal 5 that costs 1 less for each creature that attacked this turn. This one's a little bit different. You can't wait until later in the turn. You have to use it during combat, but it does work on offense and defense. If you're attacking with a bunch of creatures, it costs less. If your opponent's attacking you with a bunch of creatures, it costs less. So it's obviously a mana more expensive than Witchstalker Frenzy, but Frenzy's been such an excellent card that I think if you tacked an extra mana onto it and put it in a color that tends to play to the board a little bit more, this just seems like a solid like Oblivion Ring style effect for decks that can, put creatures on board that want to attack. It's a fine control card if your opponent's attacking you with a bunch of stuff, but I don't think it's excellent there. It seems like more of a proactive, like really strong proactive Oblivion Ring. Not that I'm like really looking for more Oblivion Rings these days, but if they're going to give us good ones, I'll still consider them. I think Static Snare is a solid little removal spell.
Yeah, I originally had this in the low B range, but thank you for pointing out that you do have to do this during combat. I'm going to come back down to earth just a little bit. I do think Witchstalker Frenzy has been impressive enough that this is probably pretty good. I also want to point out, if you play Ox on turn 3, on turn 4, this gets it down to 1 mana by itself.
Yeah, Ox stock's going up.
Yeah, similar thoughts as you guys. I'm a little bit lower purely because 1-for-1 removal when it doesn't consistently cost or always cost 1 or 2 mana, I think is just like it's fine, totally fine. I think I have it as just a straight C. I can imagine it being way better in constructed even because it's a Beans card. But yeah, I think it's a solid card for an aggro deck, especially. I don't know if I'm just in like a Essence Reliquary style deck that I'm really going to want this, like a slower deck. It's fine there, but it doesn't really hit me over the head with its power. So removal spells that don't consistently cost 1 or 2 mana or give you some kind of other advantage, I generally just kind of always lock in at C or maybe C+.
Yeah, that feels appropriate for it. Worth noting, they also gave us Banishing Light in this set again, but with a different name for like the 3rd time. I don't know why they did that, but whatever. Last white card. Density. I guess so. Like we need 12 Banishing Lights and Pauper or something like that.
So everybody thought we were done with the creatures because we had moved on, but we have a stealth creature here.
We do. Team in Dragonstorm. So there's a cycle of these Dragonstorm enchantments that bounce back to your hand whenever you play a dragon. So this one is 3 and a white for an uncommon enchantment. When it enters, create 2/2 white soldier creature tokens, and then when a dragon enters, you can return the enchantment to your hand. So 4 mana for 2/2s. We've seen that card many, many, many times, though this is a permanent itself, so you're just putting 3 permanents in play. And the dragon text is like not nothing once we get to the end of this episode, because there are actually a lot of those Omen dragons we're going to talk about that could end up in cubes. So I wouldn't I wouldn't change my grade because of that dragon text, but I don't think it's like completely, unlikely that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I really like this card. I think it's a pretty major upgrade over previous versions of the effects for a couple of reasons. I mean, firstly, the enchantment I don't know if you're doing eerie things in most cubes, but if you've got any bargain stuff, notably Agatha's Champion's one that jumps to mind. High Fate Negotiator are cards that like I could see pairing alongside this card, that this kind of just enables you to generate some board presence and then free sack it. You're not having to actually give up anything because you're just sacking an enchantment sitting on the board. And then also the obvious play with this is in the Skyfisher lane, which there's an infinite number of now at Peasant. But this is way better because when you bounce this, right, usually when you bounce the like 4 mana Cavalier make a creature effect, you get 1 token. This actually puts you up 2. So I mean, it's a pretty substantial upgrade, I think, on most playability lanes. Like this is 3 objects for 1 card. So just, I think a pretty substantial upgrade over previous versions of the effect. I still think it's a role player. It's not a card that's going to go in necessarily every deck, but I think if you care about going wide, if you care about, like, if you have any of those bargain type cards in your deck or anything like that, I think this is a pretty good card that will basically always make your deck.
We do need to make use of the enchantment, right? Like it has to go beyond just like 2/2/2s for 4 mana.
You got it totally right. It's a synergy card. You need to be synergizing. It's not that hard. It's less hard than ever to synergize with this game object. But there are certainly some environments, especially paper environments, environments that have access to like Release the Dogs and Battle Screech, that I think this card becomes a lot less exciting, because who cares about synergizing with this game piece? You're just trying to flood the board with tokens and win as fast as possible. So I think for both our cubes, I think this is a reasonable include, especially if you're going hard on the Skyfisher synergies, which I think both of us are at this point. So I plan on playing with this and seeing how it goes. And I agree that the dragon text being not a total whiff is relevant as well. So I'm more interested in playing this in cube when you have even just like 3 dragons in your cube that gives you some amount of promise to return this.
We can't not go hard on the Skyfisher stuff because they won't stop printing that.
Exactly. Yep.
They won't stop printing good ones. They're just so good.
Okay, so blue doesn't actually have too much to talk about in the set. Daneelius, actually, if you don't mind kind of walking us through blue, because a lot of these cards were things that you added because you've heard the community kind of talking about them, so maybe you can give us a little bit more insight. But do you mind walking us through blue here?
Sure. So first off, we got Wingblade Disciple. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human monk, uncommon with flying, and it has the flurry text. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So this is Clarion Spirit in blue instead of white, and for 1 more mana, but it gets flying. Now, that is not a trade-off I like. I definitely don't enjoy +1 mana with flying. I don't think that is a very good trade-off. However, it's blue instead of white, and I think almost certainly in most cube environments it's going to be easier for blue to consistently double spell than it will be for white. In fact, I recall playing Clarion Spirit in a white deck recently where I was just kind of holding it in my hand because I top decked it. I didn't have a lot of card flow, and I just was waiting to draw a second spell so I could make the token off Clarion Spirit. I don't think that's going to be much of an issue for blue. That's the first thing. The second thing is blue is by far the worst color in cube at object creation, and it has been for the entirety of the life of my cube. I think that's the case for all Peasant cubes. They just don't really give blue a ton of options for object creation, and that's why Mischievous Mystic and Emrakul's Messenger have been such massive includes for me over the last year, because they finally give blue some very good, relatively cheap object creation. So I don't think this is a fantastic card at all. I can imagine including it for those reasons I said. I do think it has some advantages over Clarion Spirit, while overall, in a vacuum, certainly being a worse card than Clarion Spirit. But I'm debating whether I'm going to include this or not, but I have definitely seen some folks being excited about it. Another comparison in blue specifically would be Zerub Strobe Knight from March of the Machines, which was a 3-mana 2/2 flyer with Vigilance that had a tap ability that if you've cast your second spell, you can make a 2/2. And I think this is probably better than that, because that card always had to survive in order to make the token, and this you can just kind of wait till 4, cast this into a cantrip, immediately make a 1/1, and I think that's like a reasonable play pattern. So I think it's a fine card, not a world beater or anything, but it's a card that does help blue in some of the areas that it struggled recently.
Yeah, I'm not getting tricked by Windrake's nonsense again. I'm just not into it. That being said, I mean, this is I can see why the Magic community would get excited about this. Blue does struggle with object creation. This does have a promise. I think one of the problems I have with this, blue tends to be a very reactive color, unless you're in Izzet specifically. Like your blue decks are very often your more control-y colors. But if you're doing like the curve out flyers thing, this could be good. If you're doing, if you're playing Is It spells, obviously this can do a thing. I think the curve that, if I was going to say kind of excites me about this card, would be something like Mischievous Mystic into this, play Mishra's Bauble, and then crack Bauble on our opponent's turn so that we generate a 1/1 and then generate another 1/1 at the beginning of the next turn. And that could be good. But that's a Mishra's Bauble line, and Mishra's Bauble is just a broken card. So that's Mishra's Bauble being good, not this card being good.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on this one. Clarion Spirit's one of my favorite cards of all time, but bumping it up to 3 mana just makes it less likely that you're going to be able to double spell the turn you play the thing. So I'm not like super hot on this. It's not something I'm going to like try to find room for, but there's upside to it, like a la Clarion Spirit. So
Sure.
Yeah, I'd be more excited if this were like Wing Tech Disciple and it made Thopter tokens.
Oh, I do.
If it made
That actually
artifact
does.
creatures.
That does get me excited. Yep, I like that. All right, so next we have Constrictor Sage. This is 4 and a blue for a 4/4 creature snake wizard uncommon. It says when this creature enters, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. And then it has this a new mechanic, Renew. It says 2 and a blue, exile this card from your graveyard, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. So Renew is basically just on creatures where you can exile those creatures from your graveyard to get some effect. So kind of a flashback ability that we've seen different flashback abilities on creatures before. A comp for this card would be something like Juvenile Mistdragon or Bergstrider, which are these 5 mana blue creatures that come in and tap and stun a creature for a turn. I think they generally play pretty well in retail, up to quite well in retail. A little bit weaker probably for cube, certainly. Though there are some benefits, honestly, to stunning versus bouncing, because a lot of creatures tend to be value creatures, and so when you bounce those creatures back to your opponent's hands, especially as a blue deck, letting them get the value off those ETBs again isn't always a good thing. The reason why I think this is worth talking about is the fact that it is a blue card that gives you a payoff from the graveyard and exiles itself from the graveyard, which can be relevant for the Insidious Roots Grave Break style decks, and we do have a new blue green gold card coming that I think is really good. That is a grave break signpost in and of itself for blue green. So this is a card for that deck. It exiles itself from the yard, and I think it is a reasonable card at 5 mana without being super exciting. So I don't think that I'm going to start by playing this right now. I prefer the I can't remember the name of the card, but it's the 5 mana blue creature that bounces a creature and then connives. That's like the only card of that ilk that I have in my cube currently.
Psychic Pickpocket.
There you go, Psychic Pickpocket. That's the only card of that ilk I have in my cube currently, and I think that's pretty much the best in class at the moment. But I see this being a reasonable synergy piece if you're really pushing graveyard stuff in blue.
Yeah, we're on the Eldrazi, the 3/5. What is it? A Depth Defiler. Yeah. I don't think this card ends up replacing it, but it's a fine enough card. This effect is reasonably good, and being able to cast it out of your graveyard to tempo down your opponent. I think this is if blue-green is going to do the grave break thing, I think this is what I want it to look like, which is where we're actually just trying to kill our opponent, as opposed to, because especially, and we'll talk about when we get to the gold card, but the way these cards are designed just lend themselves a little more towards like a tempo strategy as opposed to just grinding your opponent out of resources.
Yeah, we were on Splash Lasher too recently, which I thought was a fine card, but not a necessary one. And that's where I land on this is if I was playing someone else's cube and I saw this card, I'd probably take it some amount of the time, play it, and be like happy enough with it. But I don't know that I would ever find like a cut in a 360 style cube like ours to play it, though I acknowledge the card is just fine. Like, it's not embarrassing. It has some extra synergy on top of it. Seems like a perfectly reasonable card, even if we've never been super interested in, like, Bergstrider or Spike Shell Harry or anything like that.
Yep, so next we have Roiling Dragonstorm. This is the blue Dragonstorm. The white one was the one that made the 2/2/2s. This is 1 and a blue for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. When a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. So the downside of this card versus the white Dragonstorm or other kind of permanents that give you value on ETB is that Skyfishers, in my personal opinion, don't care as much about permanents that just give you card advantage, because the general concept of a Skyfisher is they're giving you that card advantage on their own, and you really want to affect the board with the effect that you're getting from your Skyfisher. So Skyfishing this back just to draw more cards isn't that exciting. Now, if you return this with like a pixie, then that certainly would still be quite strong. Some comparisons for this would be Charticourse and the Modern Age. And I think I probably like this more than Charticourse. However, I haven't been on Charticourse in quite some time, so that's not necessarily a big feather in this card's cap. And I think I like the Modern Age more, just because getting that body at the end, even if you're drawing one less card, even though you're discarding one additional card, I think getting the body at the end is quite a substantial advantage. So I don't anticipate playing with this one, but again, I think it's a reasonable card if you really like doing the Skyfisher stuff and your environment isn't so fast that returning a purely card advantage object to your hand is going to be too slow.
Yeah, I think to want this card, you want to have multiple layers of synergy. So you want to be doing like the Eerie thing, or you want to be doing the discard package cards, or the draw 3 cards, or you want to be able to kind of get multiple layers of value in your cube for the spot. I think would almost be there, but I'm just not super excited about this one. But I do think it kind of, for me, slots somewhere between Charticourse and Modern Age. I think Modern Age is kind of in a tier of its own. I think that card's just great. You know, if you squint, it's a 2/3 for 2 with flying that loots twice, which is kind of like if they printed that card, that would be insane.
You don't have to squint. That's just what the card is.
Yeah. Maybe if you're patient. Yeah. I mean, the only time Modern Age is bad is when you need the blocker now. Yeah. But I think this card is probably better than Charticourse on average. It just has a lot more potential for synergies and extra value and stuff like that the Charticourse just doesn't ever get, even if that card can, without any real help, put you up a card.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this on the doc, and Teld and Daneelius had already both rated it as a D+, and I was like, okay, well, I don't have anything to add to this one.
All right, then we can move on. We have a lot of cards to talk about. So next we have Essence Anchor. This is
a real D. A real D,
yeah.
You guys are optimistic about D.
All right, this is 2 and a blue for an artifact. Uncommon, it says at the beginning. Okay, this line is important. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1. That does matter a lot. We saw in the last set, the black-green uncommon artifact.
Brute engine.
Yep, the engine doing that is relevant. But so that's a relevant line. If that's all it did, it wouldn't be good enough. But then it has tap, create a 2/2 black zombie druid. Zombie druid, I didn't even notice that. Zombie druid creature token. Activate only during your turn and only if a card left your graveyard this turn. So, a few cards come to mind when you're thinking about this. Insidious Roots, obviously this is not close to as good as Insidious Roots. I think Chalk Outline is probably the best comparison to this card, because Chalk Outline had a very similar text about essentially getting to make a 2/2 when a thing left your graveyard each turn, so once per turn. Chalk Outline also gives you that additional value. I think it gives you a clue, but this costs 1 less and surveils 1 every turn. And I think that is some upside on Chalk Outline, like some serious upside on Chalk Outline. Now, personally, I think Chalk Outline is awful. So, I think this being better than Chalk Outline isn't that important. But if you are really looking to push the kind of grave break lane in your Sultai wedge, then I think this is a fine support card if you're really looking to push that. If you're already playing Chalk Outline, then I would say this is probably a card you might want to consider, even though it is blue and maybe you're only doing grave break in black green. Again, considering that card we're going to talk about soon enough, I think Sultai might be a wedge that you want to extend that synergy to, and this is a fine support card for that lane specifically. Outside of that lane specifically, I don't really think this card gets there, and that's why for me I'm giving it a D, because I would rather not play super narrow effects like this. But better enough than Chalk Outline, I think, that it is worth at least some consideration in those strategies.
Yeah, this is like if Insidious Roots cost an extra mana and couldn't activate multiple times per turn. This is an F for me personally. I just like. I don't see the vision on this. Like, I think it's a nifty card to color shift something, but 3 mana, do nothing, and we have to activate it like 3 times before we're happy about it, because you have to consider the initial tempo hit that you probably took a bunch of damage. So, even 4 worth of stats for 3 mana off this isn't worth it. I think you have to activate this 3 times before you're actually happy about it.
Yeah, just do it. Just activate it 3 times. Like, come on,
what's the problem? Get good, Scrub.
This is like a B in my heart. That's actually like just a D, or possibly even an F. This is the type of card that maybe even the retail limited format is just not too clunky, won't work. Like if you can't actually make a 2/2 every turn too, like some turn you just can't get something out of your graveyard. It's like, ugh. I do really like the idea of the card though. Two things I wanted to point out, just like tangentially, the zombie druid thing matters for this set. All the things that make zombies make zombie druids, which matters for that stupid old druid that lets you tap 7 druids to take control of all lands your opponents control. That's why that card spiked in price recently. Is because of
let's go.
Yeah, Taval, the commander that lets you make zombie druids.
Sure.
Second thing, I just wanted to point out, Daneelius keeps saying the word Gravebreak over and over again. Gravebreak meaning like, cards leave your graveyard matters type thing. That was something that Wizards of the Coast said. Like, that was their word that they attached to the green-black archetype breakdown for Murders at Karlov Manor. Like, they literally called the archetype green-black Gravebreak and then never used the word Gravebreak ever again for anything. I asked
Can we evergreen that, please?
Yeah, I asked one of the designers for, I think, this set. I was like, do you guys say Gravebreak internally? And he was like, I've never heard of that before. And I was like, this is, you guys made up the word. Like, funny. why don't you use that? That's just a clean way to describe like the cards leaving the graveyard archetype, which they've been exploring a lot lately. So
yeah, the one place I want to give this card some credit, and I don't know if this card actually exists or if this combo actually exists, but if there's any card like Intruder Alarm that would untap your non-permanents when a creature enters play, this does create a very easy infinite.
It doesn't, because it's only once per turn, unfortunately. Oh, no, never mind.
No, it's only during your turn. So, yeah. So, like, if you could Grave Break, you tap this, the creature comes into play, it triggers the thing that untaps your stuff, you could activate this an infinite number of times.
Congratulations, you broke Intruder Alarm. We finally broke Intruder Alarm.
No, I actually didn't break Intruder Alarm because Intruder Alarm only untaps creatures. It needs to be something else. I don't know if that card exists.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, so one quick note. I have to mention this, even though I don't want to defend this card anymore, but I am, because of the blue-green card that we're going to mention in a bit, that it does give blue-green the Grave Break synergies, I'm planning on adding that card and Evidence Examiner to my cube, and Evidence Examiner is a way, potentially, to trigger this, quote-unquote, for free. That's a little bit of a combo if you're looking to go down that road. Evidence Examiner is the blue-green 2/2 that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may collect evidence for, and when you collect evidence, investigate. And so with that and this combined, if you're filling your yard aggressively, you have the ability to actually collect evidence for, then that is a little bit of a nice engine.
Are you about to come full circle on Molt Tender and say Tim
yes,
was right?
Unfortunately, I do think I'm adding Molt Tender to the cube.
Molt Tender is just a good card. I don't know why we're clowning on Molt Tender. It's just a good mana dork.
I hope, yeah.
The whole honestly, if you could trigger Essence Anchor the turn it came down and then reliably trigger it from then on, it would be way, way, way better.
Yeah. If you've got a Molt Tender in play when it comes down and you can use it for to Grave Break, it's probably a lot better.
Yeah. All right. Last blue card.
Last blue card, Bewildering Blizzard. Say that 10 times fast. It's 4 and 2 blue for an instant, uncommon. Draw 3 cards. Creatures your opponents control get -3/-0 until end of turn. So a potential comparison here would be Behold the Unspeakable. Is this better or worse? Probably worse because it costs 6 mana and Behold costs 5. But I think you're going to end up having a similar output, at least on the first 2 chapters. Now, you don't get that big flyer at the end, which is very relevant. So I think I won't be adding this in place of Behold. However, I am considering bringing this in addition to Behold. I think this is the kind of card that blue control decks can leverage quite well. There are certainly potential for some blowouts even when you cast this card. So I think there's something here. It's a pretty simple card. I don't have a ton to say about it other than it costs 6 mana. Be really careful in your Peasant environments these days in adding 6 mana cards that have to be cost for 6 mana. But if I'm going to spend 6 mana on something in blue, then this feels like the amount of output that I'm looking for. So it doesn't seem crazy to me. I'm not over the moon about it. I can imagine playing with it. I think I give it a C-. It's like a fine card that will make some decks.
Yeah, I just want to share something where Tim stared straight into my soul, and he said, this is going to be a card that Teld loses to in an unlosable situation twice on week 1, and then deems the format bad and never comes back to it. And I just want to say, how dare you? And how could you be so correct?
This is exactly the type of card that I would be watching you play, and you're like about to win the game, and then your opponent just rattles off 2 of these in a row, and you lose.
So the weird thing about this card is that generally speaking, the minus power trick effects like this pair the best by far with green, because green has the big power creatures. The problem is, in like a blue-green tempo deck, I don't want to be playing a 6-mana card that needs me to like have my creatures untapped. Or I guess you can play this proactively. That's kind of weird too. So basically, I think this is going to work at its best in like a big blue-green deck where you're trying to get to the late game. You're playing some 4/4s and some 5/5s, and then you get to use this to like pick off a creature and draw 3 cards, and it's a 4-for-1. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you need a PhD to understand where to play this card. It's in your really slow decks that need some card advantage and have some creatures in play that can leverage this effect to help you kill creatures or just keep you alive for turn. But yeah.
No, this is the card you pair with a Modi, and then you have this card and the Galewind Moose from Bloomburrow, and you're like you just play your 6th land untapped and you dare your opponent to attack.
That's kind of hot. I like that.
Beans all day. All right, Teld, do you want to take us through the black section or?
Yeah, sure. So moving into black creatures, first up we've got Alchemist's Assistant. It's 1 and a black for a 2/1 monkey with lifelink. And it has Renew for 1 and a black. Exile this card from your graveyard. Put a lifelink counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. Not sure who put this on there. It's fine. I think the Renew effect here, as with many of these Renew effects, is the only thing about this card that's remotely interesting. Where if you have a Sifter Worm or some other big dumb green thing, like 5, 6, 7 power green creature, putting a lifelink counter on it and then attacking is going to steal games that you have no business being in.
Yeah, I put it on, and I think mostly it's a grave break card again. So it's like the more you're pushing that synergy in your cube, the better this gets because it removes itself from the yard. And yes, a lifelink counter. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with it. We're going to get to a card here soon that is a creature that pings whenever your other creatures come into play. Like you guys I think play the whatever that card is called, Molten Gatekeeper. There's definitely some cool things that you can do with lifelink counters.
Oh yeah, your Mayhem Devil gamers.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, this on Mayhem Devil is very hot, but 2 mana 2/1 lifelink is just a bad body. Like it's important to really underline that is not a good body. 2 mana 2/2 lifelink is fine, but I would never play that if that's all it did in Cube. And 2/1 is significantly worse than 2/2. So I think this is almost purely a card that you're adding if you're really pushing the grave break stuff. But lifelink counters are fun and cool and interesting, and you might be able to do something fun with it.
For sure.
Yeah, it is really interesting. My problem with this card, biggest issue, is it competes directly with Mire Triton. That's just a better generic card.
But it's monkey.
But it's monkey. Yes, true.
All right. So next up, we've got Krumar Initiate. It's 1 and a black for a 2/2 human cleric, and you pay X black, tap it at sorcery speed, pay X life. This creature enters X. So you can put X +1 counters on it or create an XX spirit token. This card's interesting. We haven't really seen something quite like this as far as I'm aware before. It is a weird card in that you're paying a ton of life and you probably most of the time aren't wanting to put a bunch of counters on this, although it would make it a very large creature. But paying a bunch of life to make, paying like 5 mana and 4 life to make a 4/4 is probably not the best deal ever in most situations, but could be good if you're in a grindy game and you have a source of lifelink. Perhaps from your monkey that gives lifelink counters. I think the most interesting thing about this card personally, though, is the ability to pay a single black mana and tap it to create a ETB and dies trigger on the stack. You obviously need some things to work with that, but I think 1 mana to be able to do that every turn is interesting, if not good. For what it's worth, I have this at like a D+. I don't think it's very good, but I think it's a cool, interesting card, mostly for that one interaction.
Yeah, I also have it as a D+, and I think we have to at least make note of this just because we've never seen anything like this before in Peasant in terms of a cheap creature, 2 mana 2/2 that can repeatedly make bodies while also having that weird ETB, LTB example that you talked about. We've just never seen anything like this before. So I can't imagine that. I mean, first of all, the fact that you have to activate it as a sorcery is a huge bummer. I think, why did they need to include that? I mean, I guess because it makes it a really
block, and then you can make it gigantic, right?
Yeah, it's a brutal. I guess it's a brutal blocker, but that takes a lot of the power out of this card, certainly. But it's very unique. So I don't know. I mean, very unique's redundant, but yeah, it's unique. So I don't plan on playing with it, but it wouldn't shock me to see it in somebody's cube. Is the way I put it.
Mm-hmm. This is a card that I don't think we're gonna really discuss for cube curation purposes, but yeah, it is very interesting. I mean, do we have anything in the entire arena card pool. I guess Magic in general, that's like...
I have an idea for you guys. Okay, so there's this card that you may have heard of before, may not have. It's a little bit of an indie card called Intruder Alarm.
Does this go infinite with Intruder Alarm?
It allows you to convert all of your black mana into ETB, LTB triggers. Now, what you do with that, I don't know, but you'll find something, I'm sure.
My experience with Intruder Alarm is that my opponent just accidentally goes infinite with it whenever I play Intruder Alarm.
That's how the card works. You just like, oops, sorry, I'm griefing you. I actually have infinite here.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, you can spit out 0/0s, obviously, for your Blood Artist triggers and all that good stuff. But two mana tap Pale Life to make a 1/1 is not good enough, right? Like, to do that's not very good, right? Do we have anything that's even comparable to that just like
no
spits out a 1/1 every turn for...
No, and that's why I'd say I'm not so confident in what you just said of like that's just not good enough. It's like, yeah, okay, it's not amazing, but like you do that twice, it's created a lot of value. Like I don't know, I can't say that it's certainly not good enough. It depends on the situation. And again, the fact that like in some situations, your 2/2 is no longer relevant, and so you just put 2 or 3 counters on this, and now you have the biggest thing on board. Again, none of these things in a vacuum are good enough, but as a whole package, okay, maybe, you could imagine it being keepable.
And if you're in a matchup where your life doesn't really matter, like say your opponent's on a very controlling deck, and you get to turn 5, turn 6, I mean, like, at what point does it become worth it to pay 4 life to make a 4/4, right? Like, it obviously the games in which you're able to do that are going to be pretty narrow because most matchups you're not going to be able to just pay 4 life even if it gets you a good card. But against some control decks, I think you could potentially make a 3/3 and a 4/4 and like pay 7 life, and that's just good enough.
Yeah, it's a very interesting card for sure.
Next up, we have 100 Battle Veteran. This is 3 and a black for a 4/2. As long as there are 3 or more different kind of counters among creatures you control, this creature gets +2/+4, so it becomes a 6/6. And you may cast it from your graveyard. If you do, it enters with a finality counter on it. I have this as an F. I see like what we're trying to do here, and the finality counter means if you have that and like a +1 counter on your board, you only need 1 other kind of counter on creatures you control, notably. So you can't do things like hall counters or whatever from Bandit's Hall to enable this. You have to be putting them on creatures. I just don't think this card's very good. I see it as a more expensive version of the Duskmourn 4/1, the Resurrected Cultist, I think is the name of it. It's Delirium 4/1 that you could cast out of your graveyard. I think it's probably worse than that card on average, but these cards they're playable, I guess, if you really want them to be.
Yeah, I think there's the comparison with Cultist is reasonable. There's a couple of things to note about this. One is Final Fantasy coming up, and we've seen some spoilers for that set that indicate we might have more counters coming on creatures that could enable this ability. If this is a 4-mana 6/6, okay, that's now we're starting to get a little bit more excited. And the fact that this does spot you that 1 extra counter when it comes back, the finality counter. So you have that, you have a +1/+1 counter, you need 1 more. Now, my cube currently doesn't have enough extra types of counters to make that reasonable. But again, if we have some sets coming up that make that a little bit easier, if you decide for whatever reason that you think the monkey is playable that we just talked about, or a card coming up that also grants ability counters, then this gets better. But yeah, I think you do really want... I think the counter stuff has to matter to you for you to want to play it. But if it does, 4 mana, having a card sitting that you can mill into your graveyard and then cast back at some point as a 4-mana 6/6, I think is something to at least note.
Yeah, this is a cool design on a card that I think is not particularly good. Though I am intrigued by the idea of like nesting grounds and just like cast this from the graveyard, move the finality counter onto your opponent's creature, and then like, what are they going to do? Kill this thing so you can do that again? I think that sort of stuff's pretty neat, but like nesting grounds is a niche card to begin with. So very, very cool design. I'm excited about this card for the retail limited format. I don't think it's particularly cubable on the overall package of this card. So if they were to tweak this a little bit on like a rare or something like that later on down the line, I wouldn't be too surprised and be kind of interested in it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next up, last black creature, we have Gurmag Rakshasha. It's 4 black for a 5/5 demon with menace. And when it enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So this kind of compares in the vein of like Shepherd Archfiend, more directly like Wix Patrol, creatures that kind of interact with your opponent's board. And this one The trade-off is a much, much worse Necrotal. It doesn't kill things as reliably as something like Wix Patrol. It doesn't have the potential to wrath your opponent like Shepherd's Archfiend, but it is a 5/5 menace, and it does give you a pretty big potential attack on the turn it enters with that +2/+2. So I think this goes in a more aggressive space, but my problem is if I'm putting a 6-drop in any modern limited cube deck, I think I want it to just be the big dumb kill creature, because I think that's why I'm putting a 6-drop in my deck in the first place. You may feel different about that, but that's kind of my general thoughts, is that like if I'm putting a 6-drop in my deck, it's either something like Fear of Burning Alive that's going to actually kill my opponent, or it's something like Wix Patrol that is a very reliable stabilizing creature.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree. Basically the big trade-off that you have with this card versus Wix Patrol is that it's just going to be a lot worse against green, basically, because you're much less often going to be able to kill the green creatures across from you. But most other colors, I feel like the majority of the creatures that you end up killing with these effects end up being relatively small anyways, just because in Peasant specifically, you've got a lot of value creatures and they tend to not be massive a lot of the time. I think I was taking a look at my cube before we started, and this does kill the vast majority of creatures, a large percentage of them at least. Now, one of the downsides is we're getting more and more 2-mana 2/3s that are, strong value creatures like the Lynx from the last set, and this lines up very poorly against those. So, yes, there's something to be said for that. The big advantage this has is I think you're hoping to play this and like kill them the next turn, because you play this, you get in some big attack with your +2/+2. They have one fewer creature in play to deal with this 5/5 menace that you just played. So I don't know. I think the main reason I included this, we just have so many options in this slot now. I don't know that this is better than Wix Patrol. It's just different. And maybe Wix Patrol is better. I don't really care is the truth. I think this is kind of emblematic of this entire set. We're getting tons and tons of these cards that are like maybe slightly better than what came before, maybe slightly worse. Maybe you want to be synergizing around the card slightly differently. It's a lot of choose your own adventure, I think, in this set. And I would say that this card kind of falls in that bucket. You can use it if it sparks joy for you. I don't think it's definitely better than what's come before.
No notes on this one. I think this is just a rock solid 6-drop. You play it if you want to play it.
Yeah, it's fine. All right, so moving into the spells, we have Desperate Measures up first. It's a single black mana for an instant, and target creature gets +1/-1 until end of turn. When it dies under your control this turn, you draw 2 cards. This compares to something like Village Rites or the Rat Out type cards that are small creature control. I'm not really into this card. I think it's fine. I'm not going to fault you for putting it in your cube or in your deck. I think my biggest concern is that you do get the opportunity to potentially blow your opponent outright with like a Skullduggery type of effect, right? You pump your creature and now it trades with your opponent's creature instead of getting eaten, and then you draw 2 cards. You can kill a Blood Artist or something like that if you really need to and exclude drawing 2 cards. I think the problem, though, is that when you want this card to be Village Rites, or let me rephrase this, you need this card to be Village Rites, and it isn't Village Rites, you're going to be having a bad time.
So my thing and why I'm so high on this card, and I think it's even like playable in the mainline cube, is it should be Village Rites in a very large percentage. Like, how often are you sacking something that's 2 toughness or more to your Village Rites? It comes up, right? Like, you just have a stray 2/2 zombie you need to sacrifice, or like you've got your retrofitted guy that you just want to like cycle with Village Rites. Like, it comes up there. But even in the combat scenario where your opponent is like attacking you with a 7/7, you chump and block, you can still use it as Village Rites there. Sometimes you even can like trade up a combat with this, like they attack you with 3/3, you block with 2/2, you use this, like you actually kill their creature and you get the Village Rites thing. But I think like being able to repurpose that, like you're giving up something, you're giving up like the flexibility of just being able to cast Village Rites on everything or anything, and you're gaining the ability to like sometimes kill Rosy Cotton or your opponent's turn 1 Llanowar Elves or Blood Art. Like in the mainline cube, I don't think that's as huge of a deal because it really only applies to a couple Llanowar Elves and basically nothing else. There's not actually like a ton of 1 toughness creatures floating around, but at Peasant Cube, like there's so many utility things with one, like being able to turn your Village Rites into kill your opponent's Mischievous Mystic on turn 2, like I think that's a huge, huge upside to this, while also not losing out too hard on a lot of the situations where you would just be casting Village Rites anyway.
Yeah, this may be me looking a little too much at the potential downsides of the card, but I actually want to come back to your point about the mainline cube for just a second, because I actually think that this card interacting on 1 mana against the green creatures, then being village rights against everything else, is actually kind of a big deal, because the way green decks beat you is they play a dork on turn 1 and then they just get to be at a mana advantage for the entire game. And if you're able to break onto parity, that's probably worth it. And then you've just got village rights against the rest of the field if you need it. So actually, you're kind of selling me on that, come to think of it. Couple of small things. If your opponent uses an exile effect on this, obviously you can't village rights in response like you could with village rights. The creature has to actually die, and you can get blown out by an opponent, playing a removal spell in response to this, though I'm not sure how that's going to come up either. It just, there are some downsides on specifically the village rights version, but you are right, being able to kill a Mischievous Mystic or a Rosy Cotton or a Mana Elf is kind of a big game.
Yeah, I'm not personally a big fan of village rights. I don't run village rights specifically in my cube. I run the 2 mana versions that can also sacrifice artifacts and then produce an artifact. I think those are kind of way better. That being said, I see village rights everywhere in lots of cubes. I think it's in y'all's cubes, and my attitude is no one should ever play village rights ever again. I think this card is way better than village rights for the reasons that Tim was mentioning. Getting to kill your opponent's Mischievous Mystic onto with your village rights turns village rights into a card that's like whatever, into the card you want to see the most. Like I think that's such a massive advantage, and that doesn't get into the situations like we were talking about where your opponent attacks with their 3/2 into your 1/1. Or sorry, that doesn't quite work. Maybe 3/2 into a 1/2. But the situations where you get to use this as a combat trick that, in a sense, almost 3-for-1s in those cases. I think that's just like, it makes this significantly better in my mind than village rights, to the point that I think village rights should just be put out to pasture and never used again. So I think this is a very solid card. I don't play village rights. I almost certainly will be playing this. I think it's good enough.
Yeah, it's a very cool take on this design for sure.
Yeah, definitely cool. You're probably right. The more you're kind of bringing me up on this card a little bit. The interacting with a few very specific creatures while also being able to pump as a combat trick is definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's a split card. I mean, it's definitely a split card. It's Skull Clamp. It's a single activation Skull Clamp for 1 mana.
Sure.
But better.
So that takes us to a much less interesting card in Strategic Betrayal, which is 1 in a black for a sorcery. Target opponent exiles a creature they control and their graveyard. So we generally don't like these mass graveyard exile effects, but it is a thing you can be doing. If you don't play this super early into the game, these are the kind of removal spells that get super clunky really quickly because your opponent's going to put a 1/1 token into play or something, and this card is basically becomes kill your opponent's 1/1 token for the rest of the game. So I hate these kind of cards personally. The only one I like is Shoulder's Edict, which can hit non-tokens, or like a Curse of Marauder, which hit non-token. And I don't really love the nuke your graveyard thing, though at least it happens at sorcery speed. But yeah, not big on these effects personally. I know some people like them a lot, but yeah, I always hate these effects.
I have this here mostly as a shout out to people who are looking for graveyard hate or do really like have an environment. Like maybe you're playing some sort of like max power Peasant Cube where Animate Dead is playable or whatever, and then like this becomes a way more interesting card. Like even if your opponent goes Mire Triton on turn 2 and you hit them with Strategic Betrayal and you hit their Mire Triton plus the 2 cards they milled, like you might be keeping them off their like Hollow Marauder for like way longer than they were anticipating. So I think if you are actively digging for graveyard interaction, I think this is a toolbox card for the card pool. That is fine. For us personally, like I don't think this is a necessary card at all. I just wanted to mention it because I think there are cube designers who probably want this sort of thing.
Yeah, Momentum Breaker has been actually quite solid in our environments since I added it, but very specifically because of Skyfishers, and this is obviously not Skyfisherable.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about it is it actually works pretty poorly against Gravebreak decks because it gives them a Gravebreak. But one quick note is that I will probably never I'll avoid adding cards like this to the cube for the time being because we just had our first or our second maybe Revenge of the Rats trophy yesterday in my environment, and if adding a card like this that just destroys Revenge of the Rats is no bueno for me. So
time to nerf it. They trophied.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Don't tell anybody on our Discord that Revenge of the Rats trophy. We're not allowed to talk that card. We're not allowed to say good things about that card.
No, we're not.
All right. Last black card here is Whale of War. It is a 2 and a black for a creature fish. Whales aren't fish. An instant. You choose one, and creatures target opponent controls get -1/-1 until end of turn. And then you could also return up. You could alternatively return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So I think if you're playing this card, you're probably playing it for the -1/-1 effect. There's several versions of the reanimate 2 creatures thing that are way better than this. Something like Back for Seconds is kind of the gold standard for that effect. But there are a number of other better versions. The fact that you can do it against a control opponent, though, is, decent card advantage. But the -1/-1 here at instant speed is a big deal. It cleans up a Mischievous Mystic. It can clean up the Army in a Can style cards when they're playing just nothing but the super cheap ones. It can potentially, get rid of a Heartfire Hero or something when your opponent tries to get their first trigger on it. So there's a lot of little things it can do. I think these like mini sweeper effects are something we've been in the market for, and this is one of the better ones.
Yep, agreed with all that. I think instant speed on this is significantly better than sorcery for something like Seeker's Folly. On cards with modality, generally speaking, you want one of the modes to be really strong, and I do think that the -1/-1 is very strong. And there are situations, however, where that will do almost nothing, and at least this has a reasonable buyout in those situations. Again, instant speed on your return to effect, I think, is way better than sorcery speed on your return to effect. So I think this is a solid little package, and it doesn't stand up particularly well against something like Nightclubber, but Nightclubber for us is one of the better black cards in the cube. So solid little card. I give it a C. Think it's a reasonable include.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just got the fish joke, by the way. Neither one of these modes is good enough as an individual card for a cube slot, but put them both together, 2 completely different things. Usually, if they're at least viable options, they come together to make a good card. So instant is really what sells me here. Like, a lot of times you just be able to hold up the -1/-1 ability, and if you don't have an opportune time to fire it off, you just get some creatures back instead. That seems like a pretty good use of your modal spell. So I like this in the C range somewhere. Not sure how out of the way we're going to go to find a slot for it. I don't particularly care for the art personally, but
you don't like whales?
The modality of it actually seems decent.
I also think if we're into this card, Nightclubber just makes more sense in the context of our black section, personally. We already have Back for Seconds as a creature, get back 2 creatures thing, and there's only so many of effects like that you want to have. We've talked about density of reanimation, and Nightclubber being a reanimatable target is also a thing. So we're not currently on Nightclubber, but I think if we wanted this effect, I would be more interested in that, though being instant again does let you have some serious blowout potential.
Yeah, Nightclubber's insane. So yeah, if you have no issue with its power level, I would say that I would definitely add that before adding Whale of War. That's my recommendation to all cubers out there. If you haven't played with Nightclubber before, it's gross. But if you want more of this style effect, then I think this is solid.
I mean, with this all just going back to the desperate measures, things that punish 1 toughness creatures are good at Peasant Cube. They're just
very good. Yep.
If I can sell that point with things like Atzikin Archer and Playful Shove and stuff like that to our players, take those cards and put them in your main deck. They're really good at Peasant Cube.
Agreed.
Yeah, to the point that when these cards become one-sided, a lot of times people complain that they are broken.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move into red here. About halfway through the review, we got a lot to talk about. This card, Sunset Strike Master, is another one of those F range, D range cards that we're mentioning because of the implications that it might have for the future. So this is 1 in a red for a 3/1 uncommon human monk. It taps to add red mana, and that's just full stop red mana dork. And then you can also pay 2 in a red, tap it, and sack it to deal 6 damage to target creature with flying. I'm not interested in this exact card itself, but this is them experimenting with just kind of unfettered mana dorks in red, which they said is something they're going to be doing more in the future. Just 0 restrictions on red's ability to tap for mana. They did say that they want it to be still secondary to green. They don't want any red dorks to be better than green dorks, but I don't have a lot of faith in Wizards to not just take a design like this and then just make it immediately busted 2 sets later. Just as a comparison, remember Priest of Forgotten Lore from AFR? It was the 3 mana ETB, draw a card in white. And it was like, oh, look what they're doing in white. This is like they're paving the way for something. And then like a year later, they gave us Inspire and Overseer like a year later, and now white card draw's fantastic. So if this is an indication of like red getting good ramp rather than just like all the situational ramp that we've had before, then like I'm kind of here for it. I think that's kind of cool. The card itself, I don't particularly care about.
Yeah, my only problem with the giving red ramp thing is like red is the color that probably cares the least about ramp in my environment. Like other than red green specifically, I don't know why I want a ramp creature, period. So, I mean, yes, if they also start giving red more good top end like green, then maybe I could start seeing it. But this is a red green gold card to me specifically, and I like a lot of other cards more in red green, and I'd rather play cards that can go in more decks. So yeah.
That's okay. They'll just give us a couple more AMers in one of these Universes Beyond sets, and we'll be
there.
There
You go. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Hey, turn 4 AMer sounds good to me. But
that's true. That's true.
All right, so I'm real excited about the next one.
I'm stoked about this card. In fact, I labeled it as a C. I think it's actually probably even better than that. Shocking Sharptrooper. Hold on. Wait. No, Shocking Sharpshooter is 1 in a red for a 1/3 uncommon human archer with reach. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent, which notably for you commander players, that's worse than Impact Tremors. I think this effect is amazing. The like creatures come in and deal 1 damage. I think that effect is just absolutely amazing at Peasant Cube. I don't care. I mean, 2 mana 1/3 reach is nothing exciting, but I don't need this card to contribute to combat that hard because it's just going to deal 4 or 5 damage in a game. And Molten Gatekeeper has been just an absurdly powerful card in our Peasant Cube, to the point where like I kind of wonder if it's like necessary because it's just a 3-drop that deals like 6 or 7 damage in the game. I think this card is actually truly excellent. I think that line of text, which they've been slapping on a lot of different things lately, is just very, very powerful in cubes that just create a bunch of material, which these red decks can. Can I interest anybody in an Ox, perhaps, that makes 3/1/1s every time it attacks? I'm curious what Daneelius' thoughts are on this, because you've got it rated as a D+, and I've got this as a C, and I would trend even higher on that, I think.
Same.
I believe this card is truly just excellent. Like it starts off as like that Viashano Pyromancer that's like a 2 mana 2/1 deal 2 damage but never gets into combat. But this actually just holds off like your opponent's small flyers and will probably passively deal like 5 damage in a game if it doesn't bite a removal spell right away. So I think this effect is truly excellent, and I think throwing it on the kind of like defensive red creature makes like a lot more sense than you would want it. Like it's like, oh, it doesn't attack very well, but it doesn't need to because it's still going to contribute damage to the game.
The reacher being a big deal with cards like Mischievous Mystic, but I'm going to let Daneelius talk on this too because I pretty much agree with everything Tim said. This card's sick.
Yeah, I mean, this is partially, environment differences. I haven't been playing Gatekeeper, so I don't have strong thoughts on the effect. I can certainly imagine that I need to come up on the effect and that this might just be better than Gate. I mean, I would assume that this is better than Gatekeeper, and so I could believe in an environment where Gatekeeper has been really impressive that you'd be really excited about this card, and I'm willing to try it. Part of why I'm down on it is that it's a really bad top deck, and you might say like, oh yeah, but it's a 2-drop, it doesn't need to be a good top deck, and I just don't think that's true in Peasant. Where turns are compressed and as the red deck, you really need to get the game over with. Generally speaking, having this be your turn 7, turn 8 draw is going to feel really bad as opposed to a creature with haste, something that brings an equipment that you can move over to give something menace or whatever else and like get the game over with. I think is very relevant on turn 2. Yeah, I think this will feel pretty good in a lot of red decks, but I don't really want this in red-green at all. In some of my red-white decks, those decks are making permanents, sure, but a lot of the permanents that are being made aren't creatures. And so I just see there being plenty of context where I don't really want this card at all. And part of the big concern I have is just that it's a 2-drop in red. And I don't know about y'all, but the 2-drop section in red for me is incredibly competitive. There's just, I don't have any slots. I don't know. I went through looking for a card I'd take out for this, and I just couldn't find any. And that's with me saying I want to try the effect because I could just be wrong about its quality. So I see the vision, certainly. And I think in some decks, red-white, some red-black go-wide decks, even some red-blue decks, if you're doing Mischievous Mystic stuff, though, I think if you're relying on Mystic and TPI and those kinds of cards to make a bunch of bodies, I don't know that you want to then include this card that without those cards doesn't really work, and those cards are huge removal magnets. So I see this primarily as a red-white card, secondarily maybe a red-black card, and I think it could be very solid in those decks. I can see it, but I see enough of a fail case here that, and again, the fact that the 2-drop slot for red is just wildly competitive, that for me makes it more of like a D+, where it's like, I can imagine bringing in the cube, but it's not, to me, screaming to be included, but I might try for this next season just to see how it plays.
One note I want to make real quick is that the red, especially ever since we've like reworked kind of like the is it like discarding theme going on, is the red and blue base decks just never have that problem of bad top decks because they can just rummage away basically anything that they draw.
Sure.
Like we're even on like Thunderhead Gunner right now. Like they just never draw blank, I don't think. So like I think drawing this on turn 4 is not that big of a deal. Red just has so many ways to filter it into something else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do want to say I agree that it is definitely in the Mardu space. Revenge of the Rats, anybody? But can I interest you in the curve of Goblin and Narcomancer into Shocking Sharpshooter, Eldrazi Processor into, what is the name of that? A Killer Among Us?
Maybe.
Does Goblin and Narcomancer reduce the cost of Eldrazi Processor?
Oh, crud, you're right.
Ouch,
You're right. It's a colorless creature. You got me.
Hoisted by your own petard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
but
right.
I mean, you could interest me in that curve, but it doesn't quite work.
But yeah, I do agree. It's probably worse than Gruul, but yeah, Mardu, very good.
Yeah, I'm really high on this effect. I mean, War Leader's Call is obviously just amped up, but they just keep slapping this text on things too. I'm not quite at the point where I'm playing like Witty Roastmaster or whatever, but Molten Gatekeeper having that Unearth on it, I think is just such a huge deal for that card specifically. But
one last thing, because this is target opponent, it does commit a crime. So if you're playing, I don't know if you're playing Bandits Hall or that sort of style card in this deck, but if you are playing any of the cards that care about crimes, this does reliably commit crimes.
Oh wow, I didn't realize we only had 3 red cards to talk about. The last red card here is Channel Dragonfire. It's a single red mana for a sorcery that deals 2 damage to any target, and it has Harmonize for 5 red. And Harmonize is just flashback. It's literally just flashback with the caveat that you can tap a creature to reduce the generic mana cost by that creature's power. So if you tap like a 3 power creature to Harmonize Channel Dragonfire, it costs 3 generic less mana to cast. So here we're looking at a comp for Firebolt. Firebolt is not a card that's actually on the Arena client, so like it's not a clean swap or anything like that. But Firebolt was an old, I think it was an instant. I could be wrong about that. It might be a sorcery.
It's a sorcery.
Okay, so Firebolt is red mana to deal 2 damage to any target, and then you could flash it back for 5 mana. Obviously, this has a way more expensive Harmonize cost than 5 mana, but I think we would be playing Firebolt if we had access to it, and I think this is maybe better than Firebolt. Like, Harmonize is in a weird spot for me right now. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but, like, do you want to be tapping your 5 power creature to get a huge discount on your Harmonize spell?
No,
sure
you do not. You do not.
Right. So like you want to be tapping like the 2 power or 3 power creature that's been bricked by your opponent's thing, but then the Harmonize cost is still really expensive, right? Like if you tap a 3 power creature, you're still paying 4 mana to shock something from the graveyard here. It is just upside. I mean, shocks are shocks. Like we have a lot of really good instant speed shocks now where like you wouldn't just play a sorcery speed shock unless it had some really good upside, but coming back from the graveyard I think is some really good upside. I think that's better than Play with Fire giving you the scry mode or whatever. It's probably better than Galvanic if you're just not getting the Metalcraft text basically ever. So I think this card is a solid C-level like shock variant in a world where we've got a bunch of really good shock variants. It's probably like in the tier 2 of shocks below things like Burst Lightning, Torch the Tower, and stuff like that. But I do think the Harmonized text is meaningful here. I just don't know how Harmonize is going to play out yet. Like if we're tapping big creatures for huge discounts or just trying to get like really small discounts to get some extra value off of the card.
Yeah, I think it's worse than Firebolt almost certainly, but I think Firebolt is really strong, and we don't have Firebolt on Arena. So I think if you have a paper cube, I wouldn't be slotting this in for Firebolt most likely if you're playing with it, and I think it's a reasonable card to play in a paper cube environment, but we don't have that card on Arena, so I think this is worth consideration. I agree with what you said. I think it's probably behind a lot of the other options. The fact that it does synergize potentially with creatures that have on tap abilities. We're getting one in this set that we'll talk about in just a second. I've been playing with the red one that I'm not going to remember the name of, but the 2-minute 2/2 that when it becomes tapped, you can rummage. I've been playing with that a little bit for kind of the red-blue discard space, and it's fine. So the fact that there's some synergy application there is interesting, but mostly this is just a Firebolt that's slightly worse than Firebolt, but Firebolt is really good. And so if it's another option in the toolbox of shocks. We have a ton. I don't think I'll play it, but it's not unreasonable.
It's a shock plus. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, okay. I figured I will mention this again in the mainline cube. It probably gets too much of a knock on the harmonized cost for the mainline cube, but we'll see when we get to that one. That is going to roll us just straight into green, so I'll go ahead and kick off green here with the card that you just alluded to, Traveling Botanist. 1 in a green for a 2/3 uncommon Dog Scout. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. So just to synthesize that real quick, 2-mana 2/3. Basically, when it attacks, you get to draw a card if your top card is a land, and otherwise you get to mill it. If it's not, you do have the option to keep it on top, so it's kind of got a little bit of like an explore surveil feel to it. Obviously, like if you can get this tapped through other means like crewing a vehicle or mounting a saddle, or I guess the joke is harmonizing with this, then you get some extra value off of it. We have seen cards similar to this before. Dryad Greenseeker was a creature with a tap ability that let you look at the top card, and it was a land, you drew it. There was a cartographer creature from DSK, I don't remember the name, something cartographer. That one was like really bad because it had survival, so it was like a 2/2 that had to be tapped by your second main phase. This being a 2/3, I think means you probably get that first attack in a decent amount of the time if you play this on turn 2. Though being a 2/3 is not a huge deal if this comes down on like turn 5 or something, so you probably are looking for like extraneous ways to tap this outside of combat. The effect reads nice. Like if this ever just draws you an extra land, that's just really good. And if it's just milling you some incidental cards without just like chump attack into its own death, that seems fine. We're not going to be playing a lot of Harmonize, I don't think. So like that angle is not huge, but I like the overall package of the card here. I'm not sure where it actually lands. It's probably a C-level card. It doesn't scream like synergy for any green deck that's out there. Except maybe like the graveyard decks, but is this really, is this like the 2-drop that you really want over like Aftermath Analyst or something like that in your, green Gravebreak deck? Probably not. So like overall card reads fine. I'm not sure what decks want it. Seems just perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah, I think my only real problem with this card is that the green mid-range stuff in our cube tends to be fairly tight. There's already so many good cards, and this one doesn't have any particular notable upsides. It's also a weaker top deck than some of the other cards. Like the ramp creatures are really, really exploding your early game. Cards like Kappa-Tech Wrecker are really good, and Propagator Drone are really good in the kind of mid game. This card, I'm not clear to me that it's actually a great top deck. Like it's probably fine as a 2/3. And we don't have a lot of ways to tap it outside of combat, so I think it's okay.
Yeah, it very similar card to Volatile Wanderglyph, which was the card I was alluding to before, the 2-mana 2/2 that when it becomes tapped, you can rummage. What's the value of Surveil 1, and if the card is a land, you can draw it versus rummaging? I actually don't necessarily think it's that much better. It's probably pretty similar, but this is a 2/3 versus a 2/2, but it's not an artifact. So I think it's a very similar card to Wanderglyph. Wanderglyph for me has been a nice little synergy piece that I don't anticipate being a long-standing member of the cube, and I would kind of feel similarly about this. This was a marginal playable, especially in larger cubes, but I think you really do want to have synergies with this. Like you want your Jaspara Sentinels or your Sentinel Stalwarts or your mounts or your network doesn't work.
Your flywheel racer.
Exactly. Like things that can let this tap outside of combat, I think is very important because a 2-mana 2/3 will not get in many free attacks. So on its own, I think it's actually pretty bad, but as a synergy piece, it's cute.
Is this how we're winning with that intruder alarm combo? It's just constantly getting tapped. We're gonna draw our deck or whatever, we're gonna mill our deck. We're gonna mill our deck. Okay, next up, Champion of Dusan that sounds like an anime title. Champion of Dusan is 2 and a green for a 4/2 common human warrior with trample, and it has renew for 1 and a green. You can exile it from your graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter and a trample counter on target creature. activate as a sorcery. I think all renew abilities are activate as a sorcery. Daneelius, you added this one. I didn't realize, I didn't really synthesize this card in my head, but 4 mana 4/2 or 3 mana 4/2 trample with some graveyard ability actually seems like kind of decent here. So what prompted you to add this card to the list?
Yeah, so first of all, it's interesting that this is a common because it reads very much like an uncommon to me. Reads like an uncommon. Some comparisons would be something like Ferocious Werefox from Wilds of Eldraine, which was a 4 mana for 3 trample, and then if you use the adventure first, then you could spend 2 mana to put essentially +1/+1 in trample on a creature. This one, you get it in the reverse order, and it costs 1 less mana for the creature for just 1 less toughness. And I think that overall compares pretty favorably with Werefox. And Werefox is a card that I've considered multiple times for the environment as just one more 4 mana play. 3 mana 4 power creatures I think are relevant, especially in red-green. I do have multiple payoffs for having 4 power creatures in play. Another potential comparison to this would be something like Eager Truffle Snout, which is a 3 mana 4/2 trample that when it deals combat damage, you get a food. So there's a lot, and that is, again, an uncommon, which is why to me this reads a little bit more like an uncommon, because that 3 mana 4/2 trample template isn't amazing, but giving it an extra bit of value on top of that, generally speaking, I think does push it into the realm of consideration. So specifically for this card, I'm thinking about the Grave Break strategies. Obviously, I'm thinking about a card like Stubborn Burrow Fiend. This is really nuts with Stubborn Burrow Fiend because you just mill this into your yard and then you give trample to your Burrow Fiend. So look, what I've heard as a negative on cards like this is, our green creatures have trample already. And I just don't think that's really true. It's like, yes, some green creatures do have trample, but you also have a second color that you're playing alongside this, and giving your Eomer trample or whatever, I think is very relevant. So I don't think, again, this is the siren call of this set is not demanding to be played, but certainly an interesting little side grade if you're looking for this effect. I think this is a solid aggro 3-drop in green.
You know, I was actually going to make the same criticism of our big green creatures already have trample, and then I actually stopped and decided to fact check myself before I said it and came off sounding like an idiot. And I'm glad I did, because of our cards that cost 5 or more mana in green, only 3 of, it's like 12 or 13 of them actually have native trample. Currently, cards like Autarch Mammoth and Spinewood's Armadillo do not have trample. So there are quite a number of them that do not. Very few of them actually do. I was originally kind of down on this, but you were kind of talking me up on it. The being able to play it out of your graveyard means you can play it proactively, which is kind of nice. It has a nice curve with Beastbonder Outcast. It triggers, Garruk's Uprising and things like that. This is a card that, like you said, doesn't demand to be played, but I originally had it like a D+, and I think I'm going to sit there on the D+, but I think I'm like, you've edged me closer to jumping up to like C- as a card that could have some situational value, especially in something like Gruul, just as a card that can help you make sure that you're able to consistently push damage.
Just on the topic of power creep, from Khans of Tarkir to this being a common in this set. Remember Alpine Grizzly? Remember?
Oh yeah,
how we used to play Alpine.
That card was so good.
Just a vanilla 4/2 for 3, like same exact. Oh, Jesus, 10.
My favorite thing about replaying Khans of Tarkir Limited when it came to Arena was the Alpine Grizzly deck I got week 1, where it was like 4 Alpine Grizzlies and all the 4 power matter stuff, and you just your
savage punch everybody.
Your opponent's trying to like play their Dirt League gameplay because they heard Khans was a Dirtle format. And you're just like, no, I'll attack you. How about I attack you for 4, and I'll attack you for 4, and I'll attack you for 4.
Yeah, this feels like trample on these 4/2s, these 3 mana 4/2s. I think Wizards recognizes that 3 mana 4/2 is not a inherently good stat line, so it feels like they've been juicing that a little bit more lately. So
they are notably pretty good blockers.
Yeah, maybe there's a consideration for this card. We'll have to talk about it down the line. I didn't really think about it too much because it's something about the art and like the usual stat line here just kind of reads like filler, but this is probably better than filler. Next up, we have Sagu Windling, which is our first Omen. So Omens are basically just split cards. They're all dragons. They all have a creature half that you can cast, but alternatively, they have an instant or sorcery that you can cast. And if you cast the Omen, the instant or sorcery half, it shuffles itself back into your library upon resolution. So it's kind of like an adventure that's it's one or the other. You never get both, whereas adventures you just always get both. So it's kind of like a strictly worse adventure in that regards, which it's hard not to make that comparison because they use the stupid adventure frame on these things. But they're split cards. You either cast the dragon or you cast the omen and it shuffles back, and presumably you could draw it again later on as the dragon.
Notably, this did let them just put the usual spell cost onto cards, right? So like the card we're about to look at, you're pretty much getting the going rate for the card, whereas adventures are usually a little inefficient.
They didn't have to tone anything down because it's one or the other. So the card itself here, Sagu Windling, is 4 and a green for a 3/3 flying dragon at common, and when it enters, you gain 3 life. Like nothing exceptional about that card at all. But it has the omen attached to it, which is called Roost Seek. For a single green mana, it's a sorcery that says search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then obviously you shuffle the Windling back into your library. So it's one of those lay of the land type cards. We have so many of these at this point that are like, go get a basic land, here's some upside attached to that. Now, the funny thing is that this card doesn't really have upside if you cast the lay of the land, unless you consider drawing Sagu Windling upside later on, but it does have an alternative card attached to it. So like if Way of the Land is not something you need to cast on turn 3, 4, or 5, or you just happen to draw your Lay of the Land on turn 5 or 6, like you can just cast it as a creature instead. It's not clear that creature is really worth casting in this case, but Lay of the Land variants have such a low opportunity cost in the first place that you could just kind of play it, especially if you're like trying to artificially bolster your dragon count for like some of these other payoffs in this set. So I don't think this card is very good. Like it's not like an excellent split card or anything, but at least as a look at how omens play out and like what they can do, I think it's an interesting card to talk about. And if you are in the market for like Lay of the Land with some, alternative thing like a Bushwhack style card or something like that, like, I don't know, attaching like a fine mid-rangey creature as an alternative to Lay of the Land seems okay to me.
Yeah, I actually kind of like this one. I think this is one of the omens that I think is the funniest because it kind of reads like 1 mana, replace 1 basic land in your deck with a Sagu Wildling.
With a dragon, yeah.
Yeah. So like you're increasing your density of spells, which is like, I think the most powerful thing omens are doing, which is meaning that your draws as the game goes on should conceivably be a little bit better, even if the card itself is not incredible. This is kind of like Generous Int in that it gains you some life and it can work as a land, but like getting to redraw it later in the game is kind of nice. You don't have to pay for the food. It's not as good of a blocker as Generous Int. It's not as big, but sometimes in your green decks, I mean, being able to fly does have a little bit of value. It's not a common thing in green. I like this card. I've got it a little bit higher than Daneelius. I don't know what your rated this was, Tim, but like I went as high as C-, and that if this shows up in a cube, I would probably put it in a lot of my green decks, I think. I would play the Lay of the Land to make sure I smooth out my draws early, and then late in the game, I get like a playable creature, even if I'm not super excited to spend the mana on it. It does mean that I'm getting to draw a little bit higher density. So, not an exciting card, not a card that I necessarily think deserves a cube slot, but I think it is I think it's probably better than most of the other Lay of the Land variants.
Yeah, don't have strong feelings. It's a Lay of the Land. I like Many Partings because Many Partings makes a food and an artifact, and that I don't think that this will be replacing that. And it is, I think, worse than Generous Int. That's an unfair comparison to a degree, but that is kind of what it's competing with. So I don't think I'll be bringing it in, but I agree with you. I would not be surprised if I saw it in a cube, and I think it's totally fine to play. The Siren Call of this set.
Yeah, so I did want to just get this out of the way with the whole omen thing. There is a conceivable situation where, because omens make it so you can't deck yourself, assuming they don't draw a card or something like that, you can just cast if you had no cards in library, you could just cast Roost Seek every single turn, and it would shuffle itself back in. So like I don't think can that's prevent decking that way.
Yeah, it's very relevant.
Well, it is relevant, especially because a lot of these Grave Break style decks can just like turbo mill themselves out. But there isn't a conceivable situation where both opponents have milled themselves out and both have an omen that can shuffle itself back in but doesn't actually change the board. And you can in some non-0% of matches get into a complete like gridlock like stalemate where neither player can win but neither player can deck out either. So
real quickly, because we haven't talked about omens yet, I do want to briefly go over this because I don't necessarily agree with Teld that there's a massive advantage to, it's kind of like reverse deck thinning in a way where your deck gets very, very slightly better by inserting your dragon
massive,
deck in.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. But it's a very minor improvement. But what you just described, Tim, I think is actually the most relevant thing about Omens by far, in the sense that, something like 1 to 2 games per draft in our environment will go to decking. And if you have an Omen, you just don't have to deck. So I think that is actually a relevant upside that the cards have, and especially this card being one that, if you do happen to mill over it, okay, well, then you had a land in your deck that gets to act as a creature in your graveyard, which for a lot of graveyard-centered decks is going to be a big advantage. And then, yes, the situation you described of Omen versus Omen battles forever, I think that's like very relevant. It will happen on Arena. In a retail environment, in a retail game where one person has the Omen that kills creatures and the other has the Omen that makes 2/2s, and there just is no end to that game. And I don't.
Or both people just have the Omen that makes a 2/2, and everybody's just making a 2/2 every turn. Like,
I don't know. I hope they thought about this. I hope they thought about this.
Sagu Wildling, and you've gridlocked each other out. You've traded off cards to the point where you're just both casting
one of the rare Omens is a board wipe.
So like even if you're like, oh, well, that's dumb, that'll never happen. No, it will happen. It doesn't need to happen more than like once or twice in the entirety of the format for you to feel terrible, because what's supposed to happen in that situation on Arena? Somebody just has to concede. And if you're, what if you're playing for $2,000 in an open? Like, what do you do? Like, I think you're just both speeding as fast as you can to try to not die to the timer. I think it's nuts. If they didn't think about this ahead of time, I don't know. That's a wild outcome that will certainly happen, and someone will make a post about it or tweet about it. And it's crazy that this is something that will happen in Retail Limited.
Is there a Pro Tour for this event? Because I really want this.
No,
to happen.
there's not a Pro Tour. Unfortunately, that'd be hot.
That would be amazing if that happened.
Can you imagine just like playing for the 3-0 and a PT and both players just Omen lock each other?
Actually, I think there is for this one. There's not for Spider-Man, I want to say, but I do think there actually is a Pro Tour for this event. Yeah.
All right, that's what I'm trying to manifest for the Omen I'm trying to call here is we're going to have the Pro Tour, and at least one of these matches is going to gridlock each other into the infinite. They're going to sandblack each other.
Just that everybody in chat vote who you think should win this game.
Who had the sweeter deck?
Okay, so Inspirited Jesus. I was like, I'm not gonna say inspired. That's not what it's called, and then I just messed up the second word. Inspirited Vanguard is 4 and a green for an uncommon 3/2 human soldier. Whenever this creature enters or attacks, it endures 2. So again, you can either put 2+1/+1 counters on it and have this come down as a 5 mana 5/4, or you could just make a 2/2 token right away, and then it does that again on attacks. Interesting, very interesting. What do you think the play patterns are with this? Are you making the big creature right away, or the 2/2 right away, and then like doing the reverse of that the next turn when it attacks? What do you think you're doing with this card on average?
I think the latter. I think most of the time against non-red decks, we're probably making a 2/2 and then attacking into a 5/4. But that's going to be like kind of up to you, because against red decks, you have the decision of like, do I want to make this shockproof even though they could have a deal for, or do I want to like make a 2/2? That way, if they kill this, I still have a 2/2 in the back. I think there's a lot of play to this card. It's really, really difficult to kind of not raise your eyebrows when you see enters or attacks and it creates cardboard. It's an exciting line of text to have like another uncommon Titan. This doesn't read as good as Autarch Mammoth, but it's a mana cheaper, and it doesn't have to mount to do the thing, so it just kind of does it reliably.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and Crested Herd Caller is a card I've considered many times for my environment, which is 5 mana for 2 3/3 tramplers. I think this is better than that card. And yes, I think the play pattern of this comes down as 2 objects for 5 mana and then threatens to either make another object, which if you can make that object without chump attacking with this card, you do it. But if you can't, then fine, you attack with this as a 5/4, and it's not like that's a bad outcome. So in some ways, if they don't have the removal for this immediately, it kind of just is a 5 mana for a 5/4 and a 2/2, unless you're needing to be on blocks. But so yeah, I mean, again, not a card that demands to be played. Like all the cards in this set, these are all like interesting option. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. You cannot ignore enters or attacks. That line of text has been really, really strong almost every single time we've seen it.
Particularly given the way that they've pushed combat tricks over the last couple of years. The getting to untap with this and then attack with it and hold up something like an Overprotect or a Tyvar Stand or a Crumb and Get It is very scary.
Okay, so if you have this in play and you and your opponent are both Omen locked, are you Are you making tutus or are you going big?
Hell no. I'm trying to see how far the arena timer can be pushed.
Dude, I will just concede. Like, my time is more valuable. You can have the game. Congratulations, we omen locked each other. You can win. Like, go for it. All right, next up, Heritage Reclamation. This is a quick touch real quick. So 1 in a green for an instant at common. Choose one, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile up to 1 card from a graveyard. Draw a card. So they power crept, Return to Nature. The graveyard mode now cantrips, which I think makes this actually a card that you can put in a cube now instead of a card that you should probably never put in a cube. This is the type of graveyard hate that I actually like. Is it enough for me to actually want this card in, my 360 Peasant Cube? I don't know, not really, right? Like, the thing that I really do like about it is that with all the grave break stuff that we've been talking about, you can kind of aim this at your own graveyard for value and still just get your card. Obviously, you can destroy an artifact, you can destroy an enchantment, but like the graveyard mode does surgically extract things from an opponent's graveyard while also doubling up as an enabler, like kind of just a one-shot enabler for your own grave pack stuff. So I like this. Am I going out of my way to make a cube slot for it? Probably not, but I do think it's like a perfectly playable card now as a strict upgrade to a card that I do not believe was playable before that.
Yeah, essentially adding cycling 2 onto a card raises the floor quite a bit, and that's functionally what this did. Is you have a disenchant that you can cycle when it's bad, and even be able to potentially, do something extra with the exiling from the graveyard, whether that be contributing to your own game plan or interacting with your opponent. This card's fine. I just don't want to make a cube slot for it, so I'm not really into it.
Sure.
Yeah, I really like naturalizes. I currently play Paw Patch Formation probably in this slot, and the reason why I have that card is because it synergizes with artifacts and food. This synergizes potentially with grave break stuff, so if that becomes a larger part of my environment, I can imagine making that swap. But it's direct competition there for me.
Yep, I think we're also on Paw Patch Formation right now. So next green card, Synchronized Charge, 1 in a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. Creatures you control with counters on them gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. It also has Harmonize for 4 in a green. So Travel Preparations is back, I guess, is the note here. Though, notably, as a comparison to Travel Preparations, you can... I don't know. I don't think you could do this with Travel Prep, but you can put both +1/+1 counters on a single creature.
Mm-hmm. Well, also Travel Prep doesn't give Vigilance and Trample, which is a pretty big upset.
Yes. Also has a off-color activation, so like green-white versus just completely contained within green. So what are your thoughts here on Synchronized Charge? I feel like this is like the type of +1/+1 counter card that never actually pans out, but it reads like it's really good.
I like this card a lot. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of cards like this. I have Storm the Seed Core currently in my environment, and I think it's a solid top end for green aggro decks. I think if you want green to be an aggressive color in your environment, you need to have some number of effects like this. I can believe at 360 you don't need this if you're playing, Tyvar Stand and Luxurious Libation and other tricks. But I think the curve of just 2 mana or 2-drop aggressive creature into 3-drop aggressive creature into double spelling on 4 with this and another 2-drop into turn 5, flashing this back again. I think that's going to be really strong in your green aggressive deck. So I'm excited to play this. I will be bringing this in for Storm the Seed Core. I think it's just a better card. But if green is not really particularly aggressive in your... And by the way, this is ignoring any potential +1/+1 counter synergies, which definitely do exist in my environment as well. So if you're not on green aggro, or if green aggro is a light touch in your smaller cube, then I can imagine not caring about this at all. But I think this is a really solid assertive green card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not really the kind of card I'm super into. It's a little too all in on we don't run like a Storm the Seed Core type card at the moment. I do think this is probably better than that card, but yeah, this is probably the best version of this effect at sorcery speed, but I'm just not super into the effect, even if I think it's got a very high ceiling. As we were talking about earlier, I oftentimes start thinking about the floor of cards, although sometimes with like the Oxydoid, I'll just look at the ceiling and forget everything else. So yeah, this is one of those cards I can't help but look at the floor, which is like 2 mana, put 2 +1 counters on a thing or something like that, which is like, whatever. You gotta be able to really...
Oh, we're making the Ox a 2/6?
Yeah,
broken.
I think the biggest thing is, we've got the opportunity cost of putting it in our deck, and I like these cards to be instant, so they have blow up potential. I really like when my combat oriented cards can be played in the middle of combat.
Two quick notes on this before moving on. It's kind of implied, but like for Harmonize, you can just pay the full amount. You don't have to tap a creature. So this could be just 5 mana, and then all your creatures are available to attack with. And then second, this card says creatures you control with counters on them.
Oh yes,
that's
important.
Hydras.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't specify +1/+1 counter. So like if you have an undying creature, I guess those come back with +1/+1 counters on. But like you brought something back with a finality counter or something, or your opponent stuns your creature and it has vigilance and trample. Let's go. Yeah, this has some nice upside to Travel Prep, which is a card that I think is like by the wayside, but especially if you're doing +1/+1 counter things, I would be looking at this. Closing out green, Teld, you added this one, right? Did you want to talk about this card?
Yeah, I want to preface by saying I don't think this card is very good. This is Dragon Brood's Relic. It's 1 in a green for an artifact, and you can tap it to tap an untapped creature you control and add 1 mana of any color. So it's a Jaspara Sentinel at 2 mana on an artifact. And for 3 and Wooburg, so 8 mana altogether, you can sacrifice this artifact to make a 4/4 dragon creature token named Reliquary Dragon that's all colors, has flying, lifelink, and when it enters, it deals 3 damage to any target, activate only as a sorcery. Oh, it's only a sorcery? Jesus, do we really need that line in this card? Okay, anyways. This is a big, dumb 5-color card in the vein of like Tribute to the World Tree and Courier's Briefcase type cards. I don't think this is good, but this is the kind of card that is going to completely derail several of my drafts before I learn to be disciplined and acknowledge that it's bad.
It's cool. I give it cool points. I don't know if I give it cube points, but
I will say I've played Path to the World Tree in my environment for the entirety of the cube's existence, and I do like having basically one 5-color payoff in my environment to where if you're drafting in a green multicolor space and you see that card, it's like, sure, I'll shoot the moon. I'll go the whole way, because I think Path is a really strong card if you can enable it. I think this is also a really strong card if you can enable it. I just think Path is better. So maybe I'm wrong, but that's my inclination at the moment. Is just Path is a better card. So I don't really.
No, my inclination would be better. It pairs well with Sky. You can play Skyfishers to pick up your Path and live the dream. Yeah,
so I don't think we need 2 5-color payoffs in my environment. So I doubt I'll be adding this.
Especially centered in the same color. It feels like they'd be overlapping at some point.
Yeah. The one big advantage I would throw this card is that you don't actually have to have basic lands of all the types. Like Path kind of needs you to be able to have enough mana sources built in, whereas this card can fix for one of the colors on its own, which is kind of nice.
Neat little card. Again, I think this will probably be good in retail limited, but we'll see. Moves us into multicolor, and Khans of Tarkir is a 3-color set. When they gave us the very first batch of cards, I think our thought was, we're not going to get too much for cube here because this is the 3-color set, and here we are 2 hours in, just now getting to the multicolor stuff. So Daneelius, I would prefer that you take this first card,
sure,
to just kind of give your thoughts on the Grave Break stuff moving into new territory.
Yeah, so this is Kishla Skimmer. It's blue and a green for a 2/2 creature, Bird Scout, uncommon. It has flying. And whenever a card leaves your graveyard during your turn, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So we have a 2-mana 2/2 flyer as a base, which is not, I think, as good as it used to be, but that's a solid starting point, certainly. And then it's got the Insidious Roots, style text of you Grave Break, get to do something of value, and this one is you draw a card. Now, the big difference between this card and Insidious Roots is it's a good body on its own, or relatively solid body at least on its own. And I think the difference is Insidious Roots, you really want to trigger 4 times, 5 times, and then you're just winning the game. This you need to trigger 1 time, and then you're happy. 2-mana 2/2 flyer draw card is awesome. And so this is more of a kind of card that I like to play in my environment versus something like Roots, where you don't really need to go all in to make this card good. You need to cast Winterthorn Blessing from your graveyard 1 time, and you're really happy. So I'm excited about this card. I'm going to warp my blue-green section just a little bit to try to support this. I mentioned Evidence Examiner before, and that is a card I'm planning to bring in to kind of support this lane. I already play Winterthorn Blessing. I think that'll pair really nicely with this card, making your flyer into a 3/3, tapping down their creature and drawing a card. Sounds quite good. So yeah, I think this is just a very solid little card as long as you have some number of ways to enable its ability. But I don't think you need to make your whole deck about this. You just need something like 5 cards in your deck that can trigger the ability, and you're going to be very happy. You don't need to draw 4 cards with this card. Drawing 1 is plenty.
I was just going to say, I think the grave break stuff tends to be very grindy in our environment. It tends to be like, I'm going to go later than anybody else. I'm going to just go full in and just be able to outgrind anybody. And this card can contribute to that, but I don't like pulling into a third color for a 2-drop in that regard, especially when it's aggressively slanted. I think I'm open to this card being good, but I think I'm kind of into where you're at of like, I want to be using Winterthorn Blessing. I want to be doing, not instead of a grind pile, I want to be doing something more tempo oriented and trying to actually kill our opponent and just generating a little bit of extra value more incidentally rather than like the sort of insidious roots. I'm all in graveyard looping, doing the graveyard thing. I think I want to be using this card to attack my opponent and occasionally generate a card or two.
I want to hold up a repulsive mutation and put it on this. And
okay, yeah, that sounds great.
How about also obsessive bookworm? Oblivious bookworm. For us is like at the moment the best blue-green card in the environment, and that just, fills up your graveyard quite easily. And so again, if you have like little one-shot effects that can help you draw a card, I agree totally. This is a tempo card, not a grindy card, but I think it's a quite solid one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to apologize to Teld specifically because we're going to have to talk about swaps and stuff, but like this blue-green grave break is my personality for the next 6 months. Just like I want, and my issue with this is like, is it actually just a Sultai card instead of a blue-green card right now? And like the answer might be yes to that, and like any of the other like specifically blue like leaves the graveyard payoffs, though I think this is the only one that's like really in consideration. But like this is all I want to do in Magic now is like sit there and twiddle my thumbs with a colossal sky turtle and something that gets the sky turtle back and just do that every turn. And I want my opponent to have to like leave and shit before I actually end the game. And then like omen lock them, obviously. And like just never attack for lethal, even though I could. But yeah, I love this design. I love that strategy. I've mentioned very many times in the past that like a lot of an inordinate amount of the cube of the Jank Diver game and Peasant Cube is like warped towards insidious roots right now, specifically, at least in the green-black section, and I'm wondering like how much space there is for that in Sultai, but we'll talk about some other cards here too that play in that space. I'm really enamored by this sort of play pattern and this sort of strategy, and moving it into another color pair, especially a color pair that like hasn't traditionally had like a lot of thematic depth at Peasant Cube. It interests me a lot. This is a direction that like if I saw them do it in another set, like a set from now or 2 sets from now, I'd be like all on board for like Simic Gravebreak as well. But for now, I'm gonna assume this would be a Sultai card if it came into the cube, not necessarily a Simic card, if that makes sense. So kind of called it, kind of didn't call it. Skirmish Rhino is white, black, green for a 3/4 uncommon rhino with trample, and when it enters, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Now, this is the first 3-color card we're talking about. This does not get over the hump of like wanting a 3-color card for me. It's just stats and damage, which maybe I'm downplaying that a little bit too much, but I just wanted to mention the card because I did say last year that I had a suspicion they were going to give us Siege Rhino at uncommon. And this isn't Siege Rhino at uncommon, but it's also like not Siege Rhino at uncommon. So I'm going to say that's a win for the Nostradamus pick there.
Yeah, I think taking one off of every part of Siege Rhino just makes the card a little bit better, right? Like
Agreed.
We're getting a much better rate in terms of what we're paying for.
Yeah, this is better Siege Rhino, honestly. But I mean, not necessarily for Peasant, which matters. I mean, just really briefly to talk about 3-color cards, because I think a lot of the power in this set does come in 3-color cards. And unfortunately, I'm pretty down on adding 3-color cards to Peasant. I think that 3-color cards are just not very interesting in the draft portion. And that is basically the thing I'm concerned about most when I'm trying to curate my environment is how fun can I make the actual draft be? How interesting can I make the decisions? And I think 3-color cards just aren't very interesting. They aren't really available to the vast majority of people to take. And the best case scenario is when they're highly splashable, which I don't really think this card is. But even a highly splashable card is going to be a highly splashable 3-color card. When I say highly splashable, I mean a card that you're really happy to draw and play on turn 5, 6, 7, as opposed to really wanting to cast on curve, which I think you are really hoping to cast Skirmish Rhino on curve. Even the highly splashable 3-color cards, they're still far less splashable than any 2-color card. I'm at the moment planning on not adding basically anything that requires 3 colors of mana, even a card we're going to talk about in a bit that I do like quite a lot. just because I don't think they add much to the environment. And this one in particular, being not very splashable, is not in strong consideration for me. If you're really into 3-color cards, I would consider like making that a theme of your environment, and really pushing the fixing, really encouraging folks like WotC has done in this retail environment or in something like Streets of New Capenna, encouraging folks, giving people reason to actually start 3-color, as opposed to maybe find their way into a 3-color lane based on seeing a card like this, because I just don't think that's going to be very likely to happen.
Yeah, I think this card is too reliant on being cast on turn 3 in Peasant Cube to actually get over the hump for us, but good card.
Yeah, I don't have those same reservations against 3-color cards, though I will say I think we've only ever played one 3-color card in the Peasant Cube. It was Lagrella the Magpie, which, again, was a Tim is obsessed with this card type thing, so let's add it. It's not a conversation we need to get in here. I don't necessarily agree with what you just said about, like, 3-color cards not being interested in the draft portion, but I think that's maybe a bit too big of a conversation to have right now. So I would probably bench that one. I don't think Skirmish Rhino is an interesting card for a draft environment, but I will be making the case for what I assume is the same card that you just mentioned. But yeah, Skirmish Rhino probably has like constructed chops. I don't know that, like, unless you're already doing a 3-color thing, that this really gets there for a Peasant Cube. Hardened Tactician is up next. This is a 2-color card. 1 white-black for a 2/4 uncommon human warrior, and simple line of text: pay 1, sack a token, draw a card. Very cool. So 3 mana 2/4, fine. Can't sack anything to draw a card, but sack a token, draw a card. Like, again, the joke being mobilize, right? Or I guess endure as well. Like, this is in the overlap of Mardu and Abzan, so that it kind of fits into both of those spheres for the retail format. We talk a lot about object creation, and a lot of that is because things make tokens, and this is just a fine statted card that can cash in those tokens for cards. So yeah, this strikes me as very cool. I'm a little weary of it because just last set we got 2 black-white cards that are still fairly new that I think are really good. So this is just in the pile of powerful black-white cards, but reads like a rock-solid card advantage engine to me.
This card's good. It's clearly a fine card. Couple of reservations. One, a lot of the tokens we're making already draw cards, right? Like Clues and Bloods do make already do that. You're not always interested in losing board presence to draw cards. Sometimes you are. This is a good rate. It is a good rate. I think there is a small element, like, it's not hard to get tokens, but I do think when you look at this card in Modern Peasant, you instantly jump to those board states that you've been in where there are just a million game objects that are tokens laying around. And it's kind of like a almost Magic Christmas land. We always have stuff that we don't mind sacking to draw cards. I think it's easy to get a little too excited about this card, even if I think it's good. So I think I'm slightly lower than you guys are in that I want to already have the stuff that this works with before I put it in my deck. I don't want to take it as my first black-white card.
Yeah, I think that's all very fair and important reservations. I feel you on the note of, like, do I really want my gold cards to need other stuff to be going on to be maximized, or do I want them to kind of just do their thing? My feeling is that this is largely just going to do its thing. And again, I don't need this to be activated more than once most of the time to be happy. And you're talking before about, your spirit animal, or like what Cube is about for you. And this is very much what Cube is about for me. Anything that turns food tokens into things that I actively want to have, I am very excited about. So, my feeling is that this works really well alongside Denethor and a lot of the other kinds of things that Black White already wants to be doing. And so I'm very excited about it. I gave it a B minus in the sense that I do feel like this will act as a pull into white black, but I could be wrong about that. It might be more just like a card you're basically always playing in white black. But we don't see a rate like this on cards very often in terms of 1 mana at instant speed, reusable to sacrifice a token to draw a card. And again, you don't need to put this in a deck that makes infinite tokens. You can just do it once or twice and it'll be really, really good. But yes, alongside engine cards like Tireless Provisioner or whatever in an Abzan space, which, by the way, Abzan Food has been a deck that people in my environment have drafted multiple times now, and this card will slot in really, really well into that sort of a lane. So I like this card a lot.
I have a thought. Can I interest you in some Esper Mischievous Mystic?
Hell yeah. You say no more. Say no more.
Yeah, but what about an Ox that made 3 tokens every turn?
Boo.
Yeah, it's literally turning it into Ancestral Recall for 3 mana.
I like that Daneelius says people just never get to eat because they just constantly sacrificing the food tokens for value. Like, it's like, may I have a bite of that? No.
No, she's hardened. She doesn't need to eat. Yeah.
Card is very cool. I'm interested to see if we'll find space for it in our cube because, man, black-white is one of those hard sections right now. But Sonic Shrieker is up next. Is this the only 3-color dragon that we're talking about here? Because they pushed like this whole cycle of uncommon dragons, and I think this might be the only one. So
yeah, I don't think we decided to talk about the Abzan one, despite it being very good.
Yeah, so this is 2 red, white, black for a 4/4 uncommon dragon with flying, and when it enters, it deals 2 damage to any target, and you gain 2 life. If you dealt damage to a player this way, they discard a card. So 5 mana, 4/4 flying, and has like a little tiny lightning helix on it, or I guess a sacred fire, if you will, and you can send it upstairs, make your opponent discard a card. Like, is this what you were talking about, Daneelius, as far as like 3-color card that's clearly good enough, but maybe doesn't get over the hump of like playing 3-color cards?
I think there's this one, and then the Sultai return creature thing. Those are the 2.
That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel similarly about this card. To me, this is clearly the best dragon, no doubt about it. If it was white black, I'd be all over it. But it's 3-color, and I don't think forcing your drafters to stretch to this is enough. Here's I guess the way I think about it is, if I started white black and I saw this card, early pack 2, would I take it? And I think the answer is no. And part of the reason is people in my environment more and more are shying away from splashing in 3-color unless they're specifically green. And this is actually a reason why I think the other 3-color card is more reasonable. Green cards that are good on the splash, green multicolor cards, I should say, that are good on the splash, I think are much easier to make happen than non-green cards that are good on the splash. And if I'm in a white black lane and I see this early pack 2, I think I'm just taking a white or black card over this. And so that's why I gave it a C+. It's like, if you already find yourself in a spot where Marduk's easy for you to do, then of course you're taking this. It's this incredibly strong card. I just don't think it's worth stretching your mana to make work. And that's going to be the case for almost any 3-color card for me, unless it's green.
My biggest reservation with this card, and why I probably should drop my grade to C+, is I think that this card is objectively very good, and in kind of a vacuum space is worth the 3 different colors of mana you're spending. However, our cube tends to be very synergy focused, and I don't think this actually pairs into what any of our colors are doing so much as it's just a generically good card. And then specifically, am I supposed to, in my red-black sack deck or my white-red Boros, like, go-wide aggro deck, want to splash a 3rd color so I can fit a big, dumb mid-range card in my deck? Like, white-black, I think I'm a little more open to it, but I think the other 2 color pairs, I'm just not super into that unless and then that would mean I would have to already be like you said, in green, and then I'm just like splashing super, super deep in the splash spiral there to try to fit the Marduk card in my green deck.
Like, I have this card as a B, but like it's just a B on power level. I think you guys both raise good concerns about like whether this is worth trying to get people to play a 3rd color. Because obviously if this was a monocolor card or a 2-color card, it would just be a slam dunk, but the 3rd color hurts it a little bit. On power level, it's an insane card.
Very good card.
As far as, I mean, that's the case with 3-color cards, obviously, is they're supposed to be powerful. They're supposed to be B-level cards for the most part. This one I don't think gets over the hump for the reasons Teld said, is that, like, it's just a big dumb value card in a sea full of synergy stuff. It feels like if this is the card that's winning the game for you, it's like, why did I bother doing all that other stuff?
Well, and honestly, how much better is, I mean, this is a very good card. I want to be clear. It is a very good card. How much better is this card really than Vampire Sovereign? It's better, but it's not like a ton better. And the fact that you are spending, need 3 colors of mana to cast this versus just 1 for Vampire Sovereign, I don't think it compares that favorably in a cube context. I think in the retail environment, this is going to be nuts. And yes, I'm happy to first pick this card probably in the retail environment, but for cube, I don't think it's worth it for 3 colors.
Yeah, I think this is closer to like uncommon Archangel of Wrath than Vampire Sovereign, but I can be swayed by the argument that like maybe that just isn't enough better in this spot, like for what it's doing. Who knows?
Okay, so let's get into these Omen dragons. Let's do our best to just like not rehash the Omen conversation for every single card. Like, we know how Omens work now. Let's just talk about the cards at face value. I think we got like 5 of these to talk about, but the first one is Runescale Stormbrood, which is maybe just like the generically worst of the bunch that we're going to talk about. But this is a 3 in a red for a 2/4 uncommon dragon with flying. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell or a dragon spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. The Omen is Chilling Screech for 1 in a blue, which is an instant that counters target spell with mana value exactly 2. Oh, no. Mana value 2 or less. Mana value 2 or less. So kind of a really dinky creature, like just not a very good creature. But you've got this fine counterspell, like this tempo-based counterspell that kind of trades off for your opponent's 2-drop. It's their 1-drop, whatever. The comparison that's being made here is Change the Equation as like the 2 mana counter something with mana value 2 or less, and then obviously has some other text for like big red and green spells. Is this an Omen forward? This is an Omen forward card. Like the dragon is just kind of a complete afterthought.
Well, I think all the dragons are Omen forward in the sense that, like, especially in a cube context, you're gonna have way more situations where you need a 2-mana spell than where you need a 5-mana spell. But then when you need the more expensive spell, it's nice to have access to it. But I'm going to be higher on all of these, I think, than you guys, because I specifically make room in my cube for 2-color, split cards or cards with off-color kicker activations. I think they're, like I was saying before, I just didn't think they're fun cards to draft with. They present interesting potential solutions to people depending on where they're at in the draft. And I do think Chilling Screech, the Change the Equation side of this, is actually just a really good card. I don't think it's good enough on its own. Like, if that was the only text, I wouldn't include that. But as a 2-color split card, which I think are interesting to draft with, I think this is a fine card in that slot, but I don't think it's like particularly powerful or anything. I just want to note, Chilling Screech counters almost everything in my cube. So it's like, I do think that's like a relevant, and I think that this is in a sense, it's a hard counterspell in that it's not a quench that people can buy out of late game. Like, this will always counter their Sekenzen Smelter on turn 7, which I do think is relevant upside. But I'm not going to try to argue for the inclusion of this card in most cubes, other than just to say I think that split card, multicolor split cards, I think play really well in the draft portion specifically, and for that reason, I'm excited about all of these to a degree.
Yeah, I do also like Chilling Screech, but I like it better when, instead of giving me a terrible F-tier dragon as its buyout mode, its alternative mode is counter target Autarch Mammoth or Aemir.
Yeah,
agreed.
The actual upside on Change the Equation. Yeah, I think the dragon is such nothing text. Like, I think this is actively just a bad creature that, I don't want to spend 4 mana on that. Like, I would probably even just keep the stupid instant in my hand if I had anything else to do, instead of actually playing the split functionality of this
I
card.
think the argument for it in blue-red specifically, for instance, is that blue-red often can be very threat-light, and your opponent's removal gets really good because you only have like the 1 or 2 creatures that matter, and then you draw this on turn 7 with no creatures in play. I'm definitely going to play this as the creature in that spot. But I agree, the creature's not particularly compelling.
That's totally fair. That's a nice little thing, is the spell-based decks actually get to add a couple extra creatures too, even if they're totally incidental. So that one's not like the most exciting one in the world, but it does seem fine and sets the baseline for the rest of these. The next one is Purging Stormbrood. This is 4 and a black for a 4/4 flyer with ward, pay 2 life, and when this creature enters, remove all counters from up to 1 target creature. If you get to do something cool with that, cool. The Omen here is Absorb Essence for 1 and a white. It's an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink and hexproof until end of turn. That's a hell of a combat trick. It doesn't give indestructible, but it does blank removal because of hexproof, and +2/+2 is usually enough to win a combat. So strong combat trick with just kind of a fine dragon attached to it. Like, that's a card you can certainly just tap out and pay 5 mana for, even if like it doesn't really have that much upside going on to it. But this again, Omen forward, good combat trick with, an alternative mode to it.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with these cards are going to be cube classification, because I'm not willing to play an Orzhov slot for this card, but I think I would just put, the combat trick is almost something I would put in my deck anyways, in a lot of decks. So when you slap the potential get a 5 mana big dumb dragon as well as an alternative mode, I'm interested in it, but I don't want to use an Orzhov slot. I don't want to use a gold slot on basically any of these.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's why I'm in luck, I guess, in that I specifically try to make room for these not really gold cards. that look like they're gold cards, I think you would definitely consider playing this in any white deck that has even like a black source in it. I think makes this a lot more interesting. And the trick is, I think, very good, but not good enough on its own to play with. So I do think you have to care about the split nature of this card. One thing to note is that we don't currently really have any cube playable reanimation effects that return a creature with a finality counter on it. But when we do, or if you have a card like that in your environment, the fact that Stormbrew you can reanimate Stormbrew and have it remove the finality counter from itself is kind of interesting. So that's not relevant today, but I imagine that will be relevant at some point in the near future.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was anything cool we could do with removing counters. Honestly, like some amount of the time you will just snipe some +1 counters off of an opponent's creature, and that seems like perfectly fine to start with. All right, let's move along here. We've got another Omen Dragon in Whirlwing Stormbrood. This one is 4 and a blue for a 4/3 uncommon dragon with flash, flying, and you may cast sorceries and dragons as though they had flash. And the Omen here is Dynamic Soar. 2 and a green for a sorcery. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. When I initially read this, I again read it as kind of like a nothing card with some modality. The creature half is actually like not embarrassing though, which like they printed like those 5 mana 3/3 flash flyers like over and over and over again in limited set, but an extra point of power and some text that like might matter if you cast a sorcery as though it had flash. Like there's probably something to the creature half of this. I'm not in love with the Omen here, but obviously like you stick 3 +1/+1 counters on a creature, you get a big hit in, maybe it even sticks around and starts bashing your opponent around. That's not like the worst thing in the world. Again, the modality here is not really selling me, but I don't think the card is like embarrassing. I think this is significantly better than, say, the blue-red one we just saw.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I was sitting there thinking about like what are some things that we could actually do with this dragon. And first of all, the Oaken Form effect I was originally pretty down on, but if we're trying to do like a Simic tempo thing, like if I assume the Gravebreak Simic deck is a tempo deck, right? First of all, putting like 3 +1 counters on a 2/2 flyer is like fine. Can I interest you in putting 3 +1 counters on a Shoreline Looter and then having a 4/4 unblockable on turn 3?
Yes, again.
Alternatively, flashing this in the instep. Okay, I hope I'm not journeying to Magic Christmas Land right now, but we flashed this in during the instep, and now we have cards like Unnerving Grasp, Rise of the Ants, and Spinning Wheel Kick available to us at instant speed. I mean, we're kind of gaming. Like, I don't know how many of those cards actually make your deck in this conceivable thing, but it is certainly interesting, right? The thought of like instant speed, Rise of the Ants on turn 6 after we flash this in it's kind of cool. I won't lie. That one did like make me raise an eyebrow.
You're also getting potentially Bridge Works Battle at instant speed, Under the Skin, something like Roadside Blowout or similar bounce plus draw effects. There's Storm the Seed Core or the new Storm the Seed Core that get much better at instant speed. And one thing just to note there is that like in blue-green tempo decks, part of the problem is that you'll have like the blue half of your deck that plays at instant speed and the green half that kind of does if you can get in some protection spells, which by the way, protection spells work quite well with an Oaken Form, the 3 +1/+1 counters part of this card. But yeah, so the fact that this can just grant instant speed to a few more of the cards in your deck, in your blue-green deck, which kind of really wants to play at instant speed but can't always do it, I think is relevant. And yeah, I don't turn my nose up at the Omen side of this card because I think when Oaken Form is good, it's really, really good. The issue is just that Oaken Form on its own isn't a card you'd ever include in a cube ever in a million years. But certainly if you're putting it on, like you mentioned, Shoreline Looter or something like that on a flyer, especially when you're then backing it up with green protection spells, I think that can be a game plan unto its own. So this is another card where if I wasn't specifically supporting, kind of the 2-color split cards, then I probably wouldn't care about this card at all. But I like this card as a signpost for blue-green tempo as a split card, gold card.
Fair. My nose is fully turned up at Oaken Form, I will just say. But that part of that is because I always draft in such a way that I'll never lose to a card like Oaken Form. It's just like my prerogative is to just not lose to giant creatures. But
there you go.
Yeah, I kind of like the creature half of this enough to be like, okay, if I get value off of the Omen, then yeah, this is all well and good. Though I'm not like, I'm again, this moral of the story here, I'm not sold on either half of the card. So like coming together adds a little bit, but how much does it add? I'm not 100% sure yet. I could just see these being like super impressive in the retail format and then being like, okay, I was wrong about these the same way I was wrong about Adventures when those first came out, you know? So next up, Disruptive Storm Brood is 4 and a green for a 3/3 flying dragon. When this creature enters, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. I am interested in that. And then the omen here is Petty Revenge. It's 1 and a black for a sorcery. Destroy target creature with power 3 or less. I'm kind of into that too. This seems like, let me look at the next one. The next one's pretty good. This seems like one of the like slam dunk, like I could take both halves of these cards and be like relatively happy with either one. And then you just actually just combine them together into a card that I think is just like really good.
Yeah, I think we're mostly interested in Petty Revenging here, but when your Petty Revenge comes stapled to a disenchant, I think that is, the murder disenchant hybrid nature of it. The fact that it's a removal spell that we can recur out of the graveyard with our Cadaver Lab, and then cast the Petty Revenge to kill something. I think that's really great, super cheap and efficient. We can obviously cast the dragon, disenchant, pick it up with a Skyfisher, and either disenchant again or turn it into a Petty Revenge. I mean, this one feels like it has a lot of play to it in that both sides are quite good. Like they're a little overcosted on the 5 mana side, and it's like a little inflexible at sorcery speed 2 mana, but I think both sides are good enough that if I see this in a pack, I'm pretty sure I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I think that this one is really hot for one reason that you guys didn't mention, which is that Grixis is a wedge that often has a really hard time dealing with enchantments and artifacts, and the fact that you get to put this in your black-blue or black-red decks that have like a couple sources for green in them, and then you have an out in your deck to your opponent's Essence Reliquary or Hunter's Talent or similar busted permanent sitting in play, I think is really strong, regardless of the fact that also, in a green-black deck, I think it's also just obviously a card that you're very happy to play with. So I think this is probably the second best of the one we're about to talk about. I think is probably the best, but this gives it a run for its money for sure.
What I really like about this card and the next one in particular is if you saw it in a pack and let's say you just pack one, pick one it, you're not tied to green black. You have a lot of flexibility in the draft still. It's like you took a mono green card and a mono red black card at the same exact time, and you can kind of like wiggle around. And like Daneelius said, you would certainly search for like sources to splash the other one if you didn't end up exactly green black. But I like the implications of like keeping you flexible during the draft.
More than any other of these dragons, I think this is the one where you can do that with either half. Like I think that most of these, you really want the omen side first and foremost, and maybe the omen side is better here, but the green side is very important. Like we've talked about this a lot over the last few set reviews, that I think disenchants are very important to have access to in Cube, and so I can certainly imagine you're playing the green side primarily in like a green red deck, for instance, that doesn't have, that has an easy access to a black source or relatively easy access to a black source. I think you could do that there as well, or green white.
Mm-hmm. The last the last omen dragon here is Twin Maw Storm Brood, 5 and a white for a 5/4 flying uncommon dragon. When it enters, you gain 5 life, and then the omen is Charring Bite for 1 and a red. It's a sorcery that deals 5 damage to target creature without flying, which is literally a card called Roast. 1 and a red sorcery, hit a non-flyer for 5. They just kind of stapled that onto the omen here on top of this like creature that comes down and super stabilizes the board. And again, I mean, I don't think any of us are getting out of our seat for 6 mana 5/4 flyer, gain 5 life, but that's not a bad card. Like if you just resolve that certainly has an effect on the game, and your opponent cannot just ignore that. It's like a huge stabilizing creature that kills your opponent in a couple attacks. So like, yeah, it probably dies to a removal spell that's like way cheaper than it, but it also has to die to a removal spell, or else it's probably going to win the game. Like it gains 5 life on ETB, but we're just talking like a Roast here with a whole creature attached to it.
Yeah, and then when this entered play, not only did you gain 5 life, you got to pick up your, Teeming Dragonstorm. That way you can replay it and make 2/2/2s next turn.
Yeah, you get to pick up your Dragonstorm.
And honestly, the Roast is just good, right? 2 mana deal 5 is just super premium.
I don't want to undersell just like does not hit flyers. Like that is relevant. That is relevant text.
I'll undersell
I
it.
don't want to just.
I don't care about that.
I mean, you're gonna feel it.
Do we I mean, you care about it when it's Mischievous Mystic, but like, are there a bunch of other flyers we care about?
Oh, you're gonna feel when your opponent plays a 3-drop flyer and you can't, or they play their Kishla whatever on turn 2, and this was your answer to their 2-drop. Like you're gonna feel that. Like I don't want to ignore that completely.
I'll ignore it.
Sure, you guys can choose to ignore it and die to flyers.
Yeah, that's what my other red removal spells are for.
I will say
Yeah.
I'm more worried for dealing with flyers. Generally speaking, I'm more worried about go wide. Though you're right that Mystic specifically, this will be a big bummer against. But I'd also challenge what you said before about not being excited about the dragon. I think the dragon is just a good card, but with the strong caveat that you just can't really play expensive cards in Cube anymore that don't have buyouts. But this one has a buyout, so I think this card is nuts. Really, really strong. I think it's weird because to kind of go back to what you're saying, I don't know that I'd be excited to play this card in a white-black deck that can't make red mana. So yes, it's true. And from that perspective, I'm not excited about the white card. Assuming I have access to both sides of this card, I think it's just the best dragon in this cycle.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Yeah. I would start with I want to play a deck that reliably casts the roast side of this and have a few white sources, and I'm happy to put in my deck.
Yeah, and going back to the Boros thing though, where it's like you don't really want to classify this as a Boros card. It's a red card. Yeah, it's a red card.
Well, okay, let me try to make the case there in that I don't think it's a good thing if you're like, man, Boros only ever does one thing and it's aggressive, go wide aggro. It's like I think I've been trying pretty hard to give Boros something else to do, and these days because part of White's whole color identity is the Pixie, Skyfisher return stuff to your hand. You can do Outpace Oblivion stuff in that space. There's other red permanents that provide value on ETB. So I think, seeding white-red a card like this that gives it a reason to do something other than just smash face, aggro, low to the ground, whatever, I think is a really good thing.
I'm gonna argue that we're gonna include this, and we're not opposed to it. I think we run Shadowfax, for example, for a non-traditional red-white card because like as a 4/4 haster, it's not super good. You need to be doing something with it. I just mean that like I think when we put this card in our cube, it's gonna take the place of another red removal spell, and you're just gonna get the dragon stapled to it.
I didn't mean like I wouldn't use a Boros slot because like it's just every red deck's going to take this card. like it's not going to be a Boros card in the sense that the Boros decks are actually going to get to play with it that often. Like people are just going to take it because it's a good red removal spell.
It's a great blue-red card. It's a great black-red card.
Yeah.
Can I just say for just a second that I also appreciate that these two dragons removal sides kill creatures that are equal to or smaller than their power. I think that's just I don't know. That's just a little bit of design symmetry or design serendipity that I like.
Yeah, they also made it so a lot of the removal in this set doesn't kill the actual dragons, which I think is interesting, or at least isn't super efficient against dragons. Like the murder is just strictly better murder, except when it targets dragons.
Yeah, it's like it's like all the dragons are really kind of clunky for the most part in terms of what you're getting for what you're paying, but the removal that interacts with them is also kind of clunky into them.
Yeah, so moving away from the dragons, this next card's interesting because I'm high on it, but I have trouble voicing exactly or reasoning exactly why I'm high on it. And I talked to Teld very briefly about this one already, and you're a little bit lower on it, and it's hard for me to like justify my grade for it. So the card here is Auroral Procession. It's green blue for an uncommon instant, and it just has the regrowth text. It says return target card from your graveyard to your hand. That's the entire card. So 2 colors for an instant speed regrowth. And when I read this and I see the word instant on it, I'm like way more on board with this than I would be for just regrowth at sorcery speed. Like even if it was 1 in a green. And maybe it's like the Gravebreak stuff. Maybe it's the inclusion of the Kishla thing that's in the same set that's like swaying me here. Maybe it's just like instant lets me kind of like craft around a game plan. Though it has all the same weaknesses as regrowth, where like you can't even fire it off on turn 2 like you could for a growth spiral. So I rated this a C because I'm seeing potential in the card. It's hard for me to voice what the potential is. Daneelius rated this a C. Teld rated it a D. I am very curious what your guys' thoughts are on it, especially with Daneelius rating it the same way I did. Like if I saw this in a draft pack, I would be very interested in trying to pick it up. I wouldn't go blue-green to play this, hence the C grade instead of a B grade. But if I was in blue-green, I would like have my eyeballs on this. I would really want it at some point during the draft.
I want to preface that my D is primarily a result of one, I just don't want to play a 2-mana 1-for-1 that requires me to set it up to do anything. I'm not really interested in it, even if I acknowledge that it's like fine. Mostly this D comes from the fact that if I see this in a cube, or if I open a pack and this is in there instead of an actual blue-green card that I want to have fun with and play, I'm going to be kind of upset. I don't understand why we would ever use a cube slot on a 2-mana card that just cycles, essentially, even if it like is good cycling because it always draws a good card. I just don't, not my thing, not vibing with that. So this is more of a petty revenge D rather than like it's probably like a C in terms of actual playability.
So, if I could try to sell you a bit on why I think it does deserve a little bit of excitement. Here's the full list of cards in the history of the game that are instants and say return target card. That's it. But like, we're assuming we're going to say from graveyard to our hands. This card, Naya Charm, and Once and Future. That's it. That's the whole list from the history of Magic the Gathering. And then so you have to say like, all right, well then what is really the value of slapping instant on that effect? So first of all, obviously we have very strong return cards in Cube at this point, but most of the best return cards just hit permanents. So this hits anything. This hits your counterspell. This hits at instant speed your Tyvar stand to potentially kill them at instant speed, which is something to you can definitely leverage in a blue-green tempo deck, for instance. Beyond just that, the value of being able to wait to your opponent's end step to figure out what's the card that I need to get back with this effect, or not, like I said before, not even to their end step, in response to them casting the big threat. Okay, I'll go get back my counterspell to counter their spell, but if they don't give me that big threat, I'll instant speed on their end step, get back my huge creature, and now I can cast that. Like, I think that adding instant to this effect is actually pretty powerful and easily leverageable in a blue-green space. I agree with you that we're not necessarily synergizing with anything, except for, yes, in a Kishla spinner, or whatever the hell it's called, Kishla skimmer deck, then this potentially does get extra value. And guess what? In your blue-green deck, they're very much going to want to kill your Kishla skimmer when you play it. So having access to this on both sides of its life is valuable. And I just think that blue-green decks very often are going to be able to leverage this effect in general, and the fact that it's an instant makes it that much better, assuming you're playing it alongside counterspells and other things to do with instant speed. So that's my general feeling. But I agree with you. I don't think I'm going to add this to my cube, because I don't necessarily think that this is what a blue-green deck needs in my environment. I think that it doesn't actually help the tempo blue-green very much, and I think that is the lane that I need to be pushing blue-green in more, because slow blue-green is fine, but it's it has not been a super successful strategy up to this point. So I think tempo blue-green needs more help. I don't think this is great in tempo blue-green. It's a card you can play, so I don't think I'm going to add it, but I think it is a novel effect and a powerful one.
This is a card that I'm really surprised you're into, given that it is basically spending mana to not generate board presence, not generate card advantage, and it's bad in our opening hand because we have to set it up. These are like, this strikes me as the kind of card that if you just showed me this, I'd be like, yeah, Daneelius is going to think this is an F.
If it wasn't an instant, I would have no interest in it without being an instant. Being an instant just changes the play patterns of cards all over the place. Sure. And this one gets so much better as an instant than it would be as a sorcery.
Final note, in the retail limited format, if you get 2 of these, they loop each other, so you can trigger your grave break stuff every turn without going down on cards. Actually seems like a conceivable thing to do.
You don't even need 2 of them, because there's also a 3-mana, I can't remember if it's a common or uncommon in blue, that is a return target insert sorcery to your hand effect.
There's actually quite a few loop type stuff in the retail limited format. Yeah, I totally agree. This is not a card that I'm going to go to bat, especially with Kishla like being like a Simic card I'd want to play before this anyway. I'm not going to go to bat to actually play the card, but I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad by any means. I think instant on a regrowth style effect does kind of recontextualize it a little bit, but obviously not too much since we all gave it C's and D's anyway. But Glacial Dragon Hunt is up next. This is blue-red for an uncommon sorcery. Draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land this way, it deals 3 damage to target creature, and then it has a harmonized cost of 4 blue-red. So just a quick note on this, you could just fire it off to draw a card. You don't have to discard anything. You could just cycle it. You do have to discard a non-land to get the lightning bolt out of it. So if that's the case, you're not going up on cards, but there is some card advantage to be had there if you actually kill an opponent's creature. And then Harmonize is basically flashback. And again, remember, you could just pay a full 6 mana for Harmonized for this effect, or you can tap down a creature to reduce the generic cost by up to 4. So is it, I mean, this is kind of like generically playable is it card. I do like that it's in the like draw discard space that we're in currently right now for that, so I think it supplements the Ether Drift stuff quite nicely. I don't know that it's like just a slam dunk card on its own. What do we think of Glacial Dragon Hunt?
I kind of hate it, I'll be honest. I've come down on it even more the more I read it. I grade it as a D+, which for me just means like I can maybe imagine some blue-red decks playing it, but it's certainly not a pull for me, and I definitely don't think every blue-red deck plays it. I think that the rider of saying your loot has to discard a non-land is really brutal, because the vast majority of the time when I'm looting, it's because I'm getting rid of lands, and this just as a 2 mana to loot at sorcery speed, if you're not getting that damage, is truly awful. And then the second piece being the Harmonize, like blue-red is probably the very worst color at harmonizing in the entire cube. Like, blue-red doesn't have access to big creatures, and when they do, they don't want to be tapping them at sorcery speed. They need to be attacking with them to get the game over with. Like, I think this card, it reads good if you see it as Volcanic Spite, sorcery speed, Volcanic Spite on the front side, and then you can flash back your Volcanic Spite for 6, but it's not that, because Volcanic Spite is discarding lands a huge percentage of the time, and you can't do that with this card. So I think that this might be a bad retail card. I think it's just a bad card. Like, maybe in retail when you are playing it in a green space, and so the Harmonize becomes more achievable. It's a little bit better, but I'm off it.
Yeah, I'm also down on this one. I have it rated as a C-, but I'm way closer to coming down to Daneelius's D+ than I am your C+, Tim. I think 2 mana sorcery speed cycle is terrible. The early in the game, it's okay, I guess, because we can play that and maybe we're digging for lands. But in any land heavy hand, this card does not make our game better, right? And one of the ways you lose games of Magic, the 2 ways you lose are obviously like Flood and Screw, the way you lose early, right? If you don't have a good play on turn 2, if our hand is land heavy, we have to discard one of our spells that we want to cast. If we're digging for lands, it's fine, right? We can discard a spell and like kill their creature, and that's okay. The Harmonize is super expensive, and again, like we're at that point, we definitely are not interested in discarding spells, right? So we're paying 1 million mana for like a think twice, basically, is what we're hoping to do. There was some chatter in the Discord about like this card compared to Slick Sequence, and I'm gonna rest on Slick Sequence being like 1,000 times better than this card.
I mean, Slick Sequence is way better than this. I don't think this card is that bad. I don't think it's like egregious or anything like that. Like, being able to turn a card in your hand into Lightning Strike without paying the mana on it is not like a terrible thing. It's not amazing because you're not going up on cards. You paid a mana to make your hand better and convert a different card into Lightning Strike.
We're assuming we made our hand better because we had to discard a spell. Like we're not guaranteed to even make our hand better, right?
Also, this is a sorcery. That's the other thing is like blue-red. I just don't see blue-red wanting to cast this at sorcery speed. If it was an instant, it would be a lot more interesting. But like you're tapping out on your turn to do this effect. And by the way, before you even know what you need to be drawing because you haven't seen what your opponent is doing, which oftentimes blue-red is playing this kind of reactive game. So if they'd made this an instant, I would be more interested. But I have a hard time seeing how I'm going to use this card.
I'm not going to bat for it. I don't think it's that bad. Like, if you kill a creature with it, it's not that terrible. You can Harmonize. Like, even if you just pay 6 mana to draw a card, you'd rather have that than not. Like, it's not good. I'm not saying that's good, but like, this card is not horrendous. It's not like a bad. I have a hard time imagining this as somehow a bad retail limited card with like Renew and stuff floating around as well. Obviously, you just pitch like the stupid bear that gives you +1/+1 counters or something like that. I think you're happy with that exchange. But yeah, is this taking a slot over Broadside Barrage or Slick Sequence or Expressive Iteration? Like, absolutely not. I don't think the card is atrocious, though. But
your opinion is wrong, and you should feel bad. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I do feel bad.
You're super wrong on this. I will say the one cool thing I could come up with if I was trying to like script up like what's the dream scenario here, and I think it involves Hearth Elemental, where we can like play Hearth Elemental to draw 2 fresh cards, and then we play the Hearth Elemental super cheap, and then we use it to cheat down the Harmonize down to just blue-red, and we convert into like a Lightning Strike or something, or we draw a card.
Sure.
That's like the Magic Christmas Land scenario, but like the key here is that Hearth Elemental was doing literally all of the work.
I mean, can I interest you in discarding Fiery Temper?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in any environment where you're doing madness stuff, something like this gets better. I just think there are better ways to discard cards. Basically,
there definitely are. All right, another gold card here. Frontline Rush is red white for an instant at uncommon. Choose one. Create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. So what do we have there? Raise the alarms, right? And then the other mode is target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. And this is, I'm just going to say it. I'll let you guys speak to it. This is another one that like I'm going to come in like really hot on. I have this graded as a C+. I think in specifically the context of like Boros go wide, it might be even better than that. I think this card is actually probably just like game over some amount of the time.
I think Raise the Alarm is a really, really bad card, but the second mode on this card, like Raise the Alarm is like a D minus for me, but the second mode of Pump Your Dude, where it's the number of creatures you control, is very exciting. Perhaps if you played this after having played a 3-mana 0/4 that makes 3 game objects, you squeeze through, any creature goes unblocked, and suddenly you give like +8 or something to a creature. Obviously, that's like really, really impressive. But even if you just give, +3, +4, +5, whatever to a creature, because Boros is really good at going wide, I think this is going to create spots where Boros is actually able to win games that they otherwise would have been locked out of. And there's a lot in our cube where Boros loses the game after you make this big alpha attack and take your opponent to like 3 life, and then you lose the game because you just can't get any more damage through. And in those spots, this would give you lethal, gives you better early to mid game attacks too, where you can use this as a combat trick to beat a double block or something like that.
Yeah, I like the card a lot. I think that the 2 modes on this, I don't think either mode is particularly impressive. Actually, like the pump mode is Might of the Masses, I want to say, and that doesn't really ever get played in cube. But obviously, white red is going to be a lot better at going wide than green is. But I do think that also these 2 modes, even if neither of them are particularly impressive, work really well together on the same card, because in situations where your trick doesn't do anything, you're certainly in that situation probably going to need more bodies. So I think this card is highly usable, is the way I'd put it. I can't imagine any sort of a white red go wide deck that isn't going to be very happy to play this. My bigger issue with the card is I just don't know how I fit it in the section. I don't know that it's adding a lot to my white red section versus what I already have. So I'm not sure that I'll end up playing it, but it's definitely the kind of card where it's like, if I saw it in a cube, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think it's definitely cube worthy.
Yeah, I don't think either side of this card is particularly crazy, but I do think this is a spot where you've got 2 options that you expect to cast probably relatively often. You're going to cast both modes. And so neither of them are quite good enough to include on their own, but also when you add the flexibility of having them together, they end up being a lot better than the sum of their parts.
Agreed.
Yeah, this is good modality. Okay, so next up, everybody shut up. Okay, if anybody ever finds a way to take this card and like put it into an IV and just inject it directly into like my blood system, like please tell me how to do that in a healthy, sustainable way. So Lion Weight, definitely like my pick of like my favorite card from the set. This is a black, green, blue for an uncommon sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Lion Weight deals damage equal to that card's power to target creature. But Tim, if you don't have shut up. I don't want to hear that. This card just strikes me as like amazing. Like maybe the quintessential like Sultai card, right? Like it does everything Sultai wants to do. There's so many cycling creatures now between the Lord of the Rings cards and the Sky Turtle and the Sheffet thing and the Armadillo that like I don't think it's like a huge setup cost to get a creature back. It interacts with the board, which is what these cards never seem to actually do. Like it just clears off a creature. It might not always clear off your opponent's biggest creature, depending on what you get back, assuming you have something to get back. But all of those creatures I mentioned are what, 5 power and above? Sky Turtle 6, like Armadillo 7. So like this is very often going to kill your best creature, get your best creature back from your graveyard, and then like that's all before you get into things like looping this with the Sky Turtle, where Sky Turtle gets this back, this gets back Sky Turtle, you kill an opponent's creature, and you just kind of like keep going back and forth until they just run out of steam or whatever. So I mean, it has a 3 color tax on it, but I think it fits the Sultai spectrum so perfectly that like it's not like pushing people to do something they wouldn't already be doing in the Sultai spectrum, and then it's just also the perfect card for what that like color trio is trying to do. So yeah, this is my favorite card from the set by far. It plays into like the way I really like to play. It triggers all of the stupid grave break stuff on top of just being a generically powerful card. So we will hear about this one at the end of the year review again, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is currently my second favorite card of the set because there was an obvious first place contender. But I do just love everything about this card. Like, I actually think that in terms of the way I actually want to rate it, it's my other like fringe A from this set. I am docking it down to like, I put it at B plus just because you do have to be in Sultai and you do have to set it up, I guess. But it's so easy to set up between all of the land cyclers and the sky turtles and the, you know, the armadillo, like you said, all of these cards that make it very, very easy to set up. You know, you're going to be able to do lines of like mid-game lines where you play this, pick up a CubeCobra, shoot an opponent's card, play the CubeCobra, kill another opponent's creature or like a Wix Patrol or something. I mean, this card is just, it's a value card and it picks things up out of the graveyard. It recurs, or, you know, generates value while also impacting the board. It's cheap. It's efficient. Like, this is what I want my multicolor recursion to look like. This card's a banger. I love this card.
Yeah, the comparison for this card is Consumed by Greed, which makes them sacrifice their best, or not their best, their biggest creature, and lets you return something. But you have to give them a card in order to do that, and obviously you don't have to do that here. The advantage of Consumed by Greed is you can just fire it off as a removal spell, and you can't ever just fire this off as a removal spell unless you have the creature in your graveyard. So, you know, there is, I guess, some amount of downside there, but I agree with everything.
I won't be hearing about the downside. I'm sorry.
There's no downside. That doesn't exist.
So yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. I do think that, you know, if you're going to add 3 color cards to your cube, I think it's best that they be green, just because it's easiest for green to do that. In terms of how exactly to fit this in, I'm trying to figure out how to do that. I think it might be best seen just as a green-black card. You know, I think that green, you could see it as a green-blue card, though I think green-blue is much less often going to be grinding compared to green-black. So I think there's an argument for just saying, this is basically a green-black card, and you just have to make sure you have some sources in your deck for blue, and that might be the cleanest answer. If you just add this outside of your green-black and green-blue sections, then you are just kind of artificially giving green-black more cards, because this is almost always going to get played in green-black. So it's something to think about. But yeah, I think this is certainly a 3-color card that justifies its slot, especially given the fact that it is green.
You know, you mentioned this in your thing, but can I interest you in some shipwreck dousing in your blue-black control deck?
I mean, it's the loops.
You can, if you can make the green happen, then yeah. But that's where it kind of does start to get a little harder, I feel like, to make it. But it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah, hey, we splash green, we play that, we play a, what's the name of it? Mouth of Sauron, you know, we flash it back with Halo Forger.
We put Pinnacle Monk in our deck, and we'll just make it work because it's another way to get this back. We'll figure it out, folks. We'll figure it out.
If the card is cool enough and sweet enough, the people will find a way, and I think this one crosses that line. I do agree you're probably playing this most commonly in Sultai, but I actually do think this is a good blue-black control card if you've got the setup for it. Yeah, card is very cool. I don't really have enough good things to say about it. It just is a very, very perfectly templated Sultai card. It's like exact, and this is actually the color pair that I think I'm most interested in having a color signal for anyways, because Sultai is a actual deck in our cube. It's not something that we advertise necessarily, but everybody who drafts know that the green-black decks very frequently splash blue if they need it.
I just love that there's no downside on the card at all. That's the thing that really
literally zero downside.
Daneelius, why don't you go ahead and touch on these last 2 gold cards here?
Sure. So these are the only actually I took out the other one. Never mind. So this is the only hybrid card that we're talking about from the set. They included 10, I want to say, no, 15, I don't know, a lot of these hybrid cards that where the cost is 2 hybrid 3 times. So this is Dragonclaw Strike, 2 or green, 2 or blue, and 2 or red. Most of the rest of them I don't really think are worth talking about, but this is, I think, very clearly the best of the bunch. So this is a sorcery. It's an uncommon, and it says double the power and toughness of target creature you control until end of turn. Then it fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. So this is effectively a reprint of a rare that we just saw recently and was very strong in Primal Might. Primal Might was X and a green, and it gave a creature +X, and then it fought target creature. And you know, you could argue that card is more flexible because you can cast it for 2 mana or 3 mana. And that's certainly true. Definitely true. This has some flexibility as well. You can cast this for 3 mana. You can cast this with only green or with only blue, which is kind of nuts, or with only red. So there is flexibility here. It's not quite the same level of flexibility as Primal Might. But, the simple play pattern here is just you cast this on a 4-power trampler and you win. Like that's just, I feel like that's going to happen some percentage of the time where, okay, now my 4/4 is an 8/8 and I kill your best creature and I hit you for 8, and that's going to be really back-breaking when it happens. So I think the card's quite strong.
Yeah, can you say target a Gnarlback Rhino with this? You have an 8/8 trampler that cycles. I mean, it doesn't matter. Your opponent is dead, so like the card, is just going to be something you get to look at. But this card actually, I kind of skimmed over this one, but this card actually seems good. Like it, obviously we got to be in green, but if you've got access to blue or red mana in your deck, that way you're paying 4 for this somewhat consistently. I think it's probably a pretty good effect, especially because there's a lot of green tramplers. Gets really crazy with stuff like Sifter Worm, Stormkilled Vanguard type stuff, but there's quite a bit you can do with this card. So yeah,
and
cool card.
I think there's a question about cube classification like before. Are you seeing this as a green card? I think you could just see it as a green-red card. I think it's fine. I think it's good enough as a green-red card to include in a gold slot in your cube, but there's some questions about where exactly you slot it in.
I do love the idea of 4 and a blue mono blue punch spell. Yeah.
That's good. Can I interest you in casting? We pump up our Heartfire Hero to like 3/3 or so, and then we cast this on it. We turn it into like an 8/8.
I mean, yeah, you can always interest me in that. But what if we did this on a 0/4 and made it a 0/8 and then fault?
Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, and then we get to get our free attack. Oh man, okay. This is like Wild Magic Christmas Land, but Troll of Cause of Doom looks pretty good as a 12/10.
I mean, is it even Magic Christmas Land? Because you could just play this in a green. Like, it's not ideal, but you could just play this in like a green black deck. Mana? Well, it would just be 5, right? It would just be 5 mana.
Oh, sure.
Plus 6, my troll punch your dude, attack you for 12. Like,
no, we're gonna pay 6 colorless mana in our mono black deck and hit it with troll.
Also, I just want to point out, and for the places this matter, no matter what configuration of mana you spend on this, it triggers beans. It triggers up the beanstalk. So, that's true. That's true of all of these hybrid cards. Is they always have a converted mana or a mana value of 6.
Oh, it triggers Emoti too.
Yep. Yes, it does. You could spend 3 mana on this spell and trigger Emoti, which is nice.
Yep. So we got Keru Gold Keeper, and this is 1 and Sultai, so 4 mana for a 3/3 creature dragon uncommon. It's got flying, and whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard during your turn, create a treasure token. And then it's got Renew. You spend 2 and Sultai, so 5 mana. Exile this card from your graveyard. Put 2 +1/+1 counters and a flying counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. So this is kind of goes in that the same classification as the other 3 tricolored cards, and that I personally don't think it adds enough compared to something like what we were just talking about, the Lion Weight. I don't think this adds enough to be cube worthy. The one thing about it that is interesting, especially if you're in a smaller environment that is really trying to push the Grave Break theme in Sultai generally, then this is a potential signpost for that. And then in addition, it's just a creature that turns any creature you have into a big dragon. So that's something. And again, the more you're pushing 3 color cards in general in your environment, I think this is a reasonable card to consider. Personally, I don't think they add enough for this card to make it in for me, but it's a strong card. And the flashback on this is very powerful, turning your 4/4 Gnarlback Rhino or whatever into a 6/6 flyer. That's definitely quite powerful.
For sure.
Yeah, I think my problem with this card, as we talked about a little before the episode, was that if you play it on the front end, it's a 4-mana 3/3 with no protection and no ETB, which is terrible. And so we're basically putting the card in our deck, hoping to rummage or loot it away, mill it, something to get into the graveyard so that we can use this renew effect, which is admittedly pretty good, right? It's kind of a gift of Orzhova or whatever it is. I guess it doesn't give lifelink, so it's a little worse than that. But we're also generating it from our graveyard for free, so... Or, well, not for free, but like the card itself is free.
Is there an infinite with the leaves? Because it makes an untapped treasure and it's not once per turn. Is there like some sort of infinite with like Forsaken Miner there? Forsaken Miner, sack outlets.
Plus Blood Artist. Yeah, we need Phyrexian Altar plus Miner plus Blood Artist.
We need 4 cards probably or something like that. It's kind of interesting that they didn't.
It's a legal bracket 2 combo deck.
Yeah. Okay, I mean that closes out the gold cards. There's just one last thing I wanted to mention here, not as like anything super cube worthy, but this is the 3rd standard release set in a row where they've given us the gain lands. They were in Foundations and they were in Ether Drift as well. So the enters the battlefield tapped, gain a life lands, and like thematically they make sense in Khans of Tarkir because in Tarkir Dragonstorm because Khans was where they were originally printed. So I kind of would expect them to be here. But if we're gonna just like revisit these set after set after set, can we like throw some land types, some basic land types on these and make them like just a tiny bit more interesting than they are? Like would that be too much of an ask to get these gain lands with like land types on them?
Well, remember
like
when in the year end review that we did last year, we were talking about new dual lands, and the comment that I made was I was just excited to see what they gave us because obviously they're in this mode of giving us lots of cool new dual lands, and then we got back to back to back. What the heck? What's going on? I don't understand.
Yeah, gain lands.
These are the most boring of all the lands. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind seeing the gain lands from a limited perspective, but like, can we power creep the gain lands at this point, please? Like, just throw like that would that even change anything for this retail limited format if these just have like basic land types on them? I don't know. Maybe it would affect like 1 or 2 cards or something like that. I guess it would for the cycle of rare lands that check the land types of your other cards. But who cares? Who cares? Give me something better than the gain lands. What I'm really asking for is another cycle of tap lands with land types for the stupid Lord of the Rings cyclers, because our drafters keep asking us to play the snow lands, and like I really don't think it's worth nerfing an entire cycle of dual lands just to make the 5 Lord of the Rings cards better. It doesn't make sense to me, but I would like another playable cycle of lands with basic land types that aren't stupid Windscarred Crag and Dismal Backwaters for like the 10th time. Just a wish list.
Surely Final Fantasy will power creep this.
My plan is going to be to add the 5 new tri-lands. They're new to me. They're not new to y'all, but the 5 tri-lands from this set, and then I'm gonna add in like a second copy of the 5 allied DMU type lands to make those land cyclers better. Because my drafters are in the same boat. The land cyclers just aren't good enough at the moment without a little bit more of the type lands available to them.
Yeah.
So
well, they're just good enough is the thing.
Sure. Exactly.
They're not. They don't excel. They're just good enough.
Right. Yep.
Okay, I mean, that closes out the Peasant review. That's every card. That's not even every card we necessarily wanted to or could have talked about. That was just like that was after we nixed some cards from the review. So, I mean, the excitement level is huge on this. I think I'm like on board with Daneelius' thought that like the 3-color stuff might not necessarily get there, though there's clearly like 1 or 2 gold cards, like 3-color gold cards that I think I'm going to pitch at least for the Peasant Cube, and Teld and I can talk about it. I don't think it'll disrupt it. We've seen this in our mainline cube, like having a handful of 3-color cards, like 3 or 4 of them, doesn't really disrupt anything. It's once you start getting like completely out of balance that it's a problem. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up with just some thoughts on the set. Like what are you most excited about? What cards are you really dying to play? You know, what are the big question marks? Like just overall thoughts on Dragonstorm, Tarkir Dragonstorm here.
Yeah, I think that White got a lot of tools in this set. None of them are massive upgrades on things that we've seen before. I think probably my favorite card and the best card from the set is the Sun Pearl Kirin, the new Skyfisher. I think that card is really excellent. But it also just got a lot of little improvements, the Static Snare, the Fortress Kinguard, and then Pack Beast, I think could actually be kind of the big new card of the set, the big new bad of the set. We'll see what it does to retail. I think the other colors honestly didn't get a lot of stuff that I'm super excited to add. I do think that the Omens are very cool. I plan on adding potentially 3 or 4 of them to my cube, and I'm really excited to see how they play. And then, we got a few gold cards. Honestly, it seems to me like they kind of depowered a lot of the gold cards because there's so many of them in the retail environment that they didn't want to give us, a ton of bangers. And that's a little bit of a departure from what we've seen over the last year or so, where almost every single gold card is insane in most sets. I don't really think that's where we're at with this set, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So I anticipate getting to add something like 20 cards from this set, which is totally reasonable. And I think it will be, an improvement to Cube overall without there being just tons of best-in-class bangers like MH3 or Duskmourn or similar sets.
Teld, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like that this set has a lot of cards that are interesting cards that you need to consider without being just obvious best in class. I'm, went from fairly low in this set to super high, like we said at the beginning of the episode. I'm really interested to try out the limited format. I'm ready for this to look like a grindy format and then turn out to be the fastest format of all time. Just get crushed by super powerful Mardu starts and never get to cast any of these sweet grindy cards. But this set looks really cool. It's got a lot of really interesting cards. We were talking about before about potentially, just having to talk for like 10 seconds about some of these cards to get through them. Yeah, so I mean, and then I believe Final Fantasy is the next set, right?
Yes,
sir.
And in fact, I know that because when I originally put this document together, I had I think it's Garland on the list, and I was like, oh, Daneelius is like so excited about this card, and then I was like, wait a second, that's not the next set coming out.
Please reserve 2 hours of that set review for me to talk about Garland, please.
Yeah. I'll go eat some lunch or something and come back to it when you're done.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Final Fantasy set already has some super interesting designs that they've teased. So I'm actually pretty excited about that one as someone who's played all the games. But I expect this will be, unless, I get destroyed by that Blizzard card 2 times in the first week, I suspect this will be where I actually come back to limited because I took a bit of a break over the last couple of sets. I really didn't like them. So I've been playing very limited amounts of retail lately. Yeah. I was trying to avoid walking myself into that one after I realized what I said.
Yeah. I'm super stoked. Obviously Khans Tarkir. I'm one of the like few people who's still just like Khans Tarkir is great. Everybody else shut up about it. The Sultai cards, like the Sultai Spectrum cards, are like really high on my list of things that I want to try out. I will say like 2 big question marks from the set are the obviously the 0-4 that I came in hot on. Like I just suspect it'll be good, and we'll see. It could be completely wrong, though I expect people to grovel at my feet if I was right about it. And then the other one is the Village Rites card. I think that's just such a sweet design that's not immediately apparent that it's better or worse than like the version of the card we've been playing already, and I'm just excited to see where it lands. So outside of the obvious like Sultai is my life and my personality and whatever, outside of that stuff, like those are the things I'm interested in. So yeah, I keep saying Khans Tarkir. Tarkir Dragonstorm looks awesome. It's setting us up for like some really sweet back-to-back sets going into Final Fantasy and Eternities, Edge of Eternities before we get to whatever the second half of this year is that nobody cares about. So I'm excited that we're getting something of this caliber from a return visit, which I'm not normally excited about the return visit. So any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Just that this was a really well handled set. This looks, the designs are sweet. The lore it looks like they actually managed to nail that knife's edge of like having the dragons, but also having the con stuff. So big W for the design team after the disaster of the last set.
Yeah, magic feels like magic again.
For now.
For now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Check out our socials, twitter.com/JankDiverGaming, youtube.com/JankDiverGaming. Come find the Jank Diver Gaming Discord. There will be links wherever you're listening to this podcast, and obviously check out Daneelius's cube as well. We will have links to that as well. And you can find Daneelius in our Discord, waxing poetic about Peasant Cube, as well as the limited level up server where you serve as a moderator there. So I believe this episode is coming out after the mainline review. We'll see how that goes. It might come out before, but whatever. Once we get through review topics and stuff like that, we'll be back with our usual rigmarole, and hopefully we'll get Chris back on some normal content episodes outside of spoiler territory. So thanks for joining, gentlemen. This has been a fun set to talk through, and to the listeners, we will catch you all next time.
I want to preface that my D is primarily a result of excitement whiplash. So this is more of a petty revenge D. It's cheap, it's efficient. It's just going to be something you get to look at if you squint. I think if you care about going wide, I think I'm a little more open to it. I'm just not super excited about this one, but I mean, we're kind of gaming.